Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the coldest, most miserable chapters of modern history. Not a fairy tale, not a Hollywood war epic, but the freezing nightmare that you as soldiers faced in the winter of 1944. We're heading straight into the Ardennes forest during the Battle of the Bulge, where survival wasn't about medals or glory, but about finding a way to keep your body from turning into a popsicle while artillery shells fell from the sky. Forget the warm barracks, forget heated tents, forget even the idea of dry socks. What you've got here is snow up to your knees, ice on your eyelashes, and a shovel in your frozen hands. If you thought medieval life was bad, just wait until you hear what it's like to build a home out of snow and mud while the German army is trying to erase you from existence. Before we start digging into the ground like desperate human moles, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy these long, strange dives into uncomfortable history. And I'd love to know in the comments where you're listening from, and what the weather is like right now. Maybe you're cozy under a blanket, maybe you're sweating through summer, but either way, spare a thought for soldiers who had neither. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe even pull the blanket a little tighter around your shoulders. Tonight, we're about to step into December 1944. The trees are bare, the snow is deep, and you're wearing a uniform that's already soaked through. You've just woken up in the Ardennes, and the only thing colder than the wind against your face is the thought of how long the day ahead will be. You open your eyes, though it feels like they're frozen shut. The cold stings before you even move. Your face is raw, your nose is leaking, and the first thing you notice is that your helmet, which you used as a pillow, has slid sideways during the night and filled with snow. Congratulations, you just slept in the Ardennes forest in December of 1944. And by slept, I mean you drifted in and out of a shivering trance while artillery echoed somewhere in the distance. No mattress, no blankets, no heated barracks. Just a shallow hole you clawed out of the ground yesterday, now half flooded with icy slush and lined with pine branches that crackle when you shift your weight. They were supposed to insulate you. In reality, they just remind you that trees aren't as comfortable as they look. Your body feels like it belongs to someone else. Your fingers don't bend easily. Your toes ache in a way that's less pain and more numb alarm. And the wool uniform clinging to your skin is stiff with yesterday's melted snow. You try to stretch, but your muscles don't want to cooperate. They're tight, cramped, like frozen ropes pulled too hard. You're 20 years old, maybe 22 if you lied about your age when you signed up, but you feel like you've aged 50 years in one night. The air burns every time you breathe in. You inhale through your mouth, the taste of gun oil and cold metal lingering from your rifle, which you kept tucked against you like a lifeline. The smell around you is a mix of wet wool, unwashed bodies, damp earth, and smoke that drifts from some unseen fire down the line. It's a reminder that you're not alone, though not alone doesn't mean comfortable. Your buddy in the foxhole shifted onto your arm sometime in the night, and now you're pinned under him, shoulder stiff, unable to shake him awake because you know he needs the rest just as badly as you do. Somewhere a sergeant is shouting. His voice carries through the trees, muffled but sharp enough to remind you that this isn't a camping trip gone wrong. This is war. The Battle of the Bulge, the last great German offensive. Though you don't know the history yet, all you know is the present. Cold, hunger, exhaustion. The bigger picture, strategy, front lines, tactical advantage is too big for your frozen brain to hold on to. What you do know is that your boots are wet, and your socks haven't been dry since November, and the ground you slept on is slowly trying to merge with your body. You roll over, pulling yourself upright with a grunt that feels louder than it should. Snow falls from the edge of your helmet into your lap, adding one more layer of misery to the pile. You look around, and the Ardennes stares back. Dark, skeletal trees, branches heavy with snow, a forest floor blanketed in white that should be beautiful, but isn't. Beauty requires distance. Up close, it's just another reminder of how endless and merciless this place feels. Your breath clouds in front of your face, a pale fog that vanishes as quickly as it appears. It makes you think of steam rising from coffee, except there's no coffee here. Just a tin cup somewhere in your pack, maybe a few crumbs of hard biscuit, maybe a cigarette if you saved one from yesterday. You'd light it now, but even the thought of taking your hands out of your gloves makes your skin sting. The gloves themselves are a joke. Thin wool, already worn through at the fingertips, damp from sweat and snow. They don't insulate, they just give you the illusion of protection, a layer between your flesh and the freezing air. The truth is, your fingers are already on their way to frostbite. You've seen it happen. A guy in your unit woke up yesterday with blackened toes. They had to cut his boot off. He tried to laugh, but his face crumpled when he realised those toes weren't coming back. The foxhole you carved yesterday isn't much better than the ground around it. You remember digging, the shovel biting into frozen dirt, the handle blistering your palms even through gloves. Every inch took effort. The earth resisted, stubborn and cold, like it knew you didn't belong here. When you finally managed to carve a shallow depression big enough to curl up in, you felt relief. Temporary relief. Last night, as snow melted and seeped through the branches, the water pooled at the bottom. Your great achievement, your shelter, turned into a muddy refrigerator box. Your clothes are layered, but layers don't help when they're soaked through. Wool shirt, wool trousers, field jacket, a thin overcoat. They trap the cold just as effectively as they trap the warmth. The only thing keeping you alive is movement, but you haven't moved in hours, and your body knows it. Your teeth chatter, your jaw aches, and the sound is just loud enough to make you paranoid. Every soldier lives with the thought that noise attracts attention. Out here, attention isn't good. You glance at your rifle, propped against the side of the foxhole, its metal glinting under a thin crust of frost. You know better than to touch it with bare skin. Metal this cold will take a layer of you with it. But you reach for it anyway, checking the chamber, brushing snow off the stock, convincing yourself that function matters even when comfort doesn't. The rifle is your companion, your blanket, your pillow, your defense. It's also a frozen lump of steel that weighs more than it should in your stiff hands. A crow caws overhead, its black shape darting through the white sky. It feels like mockery. The bird can fly away. You're stuck here, rooted to the ground like the trees, waiting for orders, waiting for the next barrage, waiting for anything that breaks up the monotony of pain and cold. You'd almost welcome noise, if only to remind you that you're alive. Your stomach growls, a hollow ache that cuts through the numbness. You dig through your pockets, fingers clumsy, and pull out a piece of K-ration. It's hard as a rock, wrapped in waxy paper that tears reluctantly. You chew, jaw stiff, the taste something between cardboard and dust. You swallow anyway, because hunger is worse. The food sits heavy in your stomach, a small victory that feels more like a truce. Around you, other soldiers stir. Coughs break the silence. Boots scrape against the frozen earth. Someone mutters a curse about the cold. No one says good morning. Morning doesn't mean anything here. It's just another period of light before the darkness comes back. The sun, when it rises, is pale and weak, filtered through thick grey clouds. It gives no warmth, just the illusion of time passing. You rub your hands together, trying to summon heat, but friction only makes your skin raw. Your nails are cracked, dirt embedded under them, knuckles red and split. You pull your gloves back on, knowing it's useless, but needing the ritual. Little actions, little habits, they matter. They're the only thing that makes this place feel less like a punishment and more like a routine. Somewhere, artillery thunders. Not close enough to panic, but close enough to remind you that today won't be quiet. The sound rolls through the trees, echoes across the snow, and fades, leaving silence more oppressive than before. You close your eyes for a second, just long enough to imagine being anywhere else. A warm room, a dry bed, food that isn't frozen or stale. The thought doesn't last. The wind cuts through your coat, forcing you back into reality. You shift, adjusting your position in the foxhole, trying to find comfort where none exists. Your legs are stiff, your back sore, your body screaming for movement. You'll get it soon enough. Orders will come, or shells will fall, or you'll be told to dig deeper, build bigger, find another spot. For now, you sit, shivering, waiting, alive but not entirely convinced it's a blessing. You shift again, trying to convince yourself that the ground underneath you is just uncomfortable and not actively hostile. But the snow reminds you otherwise. It crunches, it seeps, it clings. It's under your boots, inside your boots, packed against your knees, melted into your socks, and settling into every fold of your clothing. Snow isn't a background here. It's the main character, and it doesn't care whether you live or freeze. You try to brush it away, but brushing is pointless. The flakes just land again, covering your pack, your rifle, the hole you've scraped out of the earth, and eventually you. You wake up with it on your face, your chest, your legs, and at this point it feels less like weather and more like a second uniform. Sleeping in the Ardennes isn't sleep the way you used to understand it. Back home, a mattress meant something soft. Here, your mattress is snow compressed by your body weight, icy ridges digging into your hip bones, the ground frozen solid beneath. You curl up, knees to chest, trying to make yourself smaller, trying to trap whatever body heat you can. The snow gives nothing back. It steals, pulling warmth out of you with every passing second, like it has a personal grudge against your existence. The blanket situation isn't much better. There are wool coats, yes. Wool that's already wet, heavy, stiff as a board. Once snow melts into it, the fibres freeze into sharp ridges that scrape against your neck and arms. Every time you move, it's like lying under a frozen doormat. You tug the coat tighter around you, but it never feels like enough. Cold seeps through the seams, through the gaps at your wrists and collar, through the hole where a button popped off 3 weeks ago. The snow presses in from above, drifts sliding down into the foxhole, dusting your face with a cruel kind of tenderness. You brush it off, but it's back again within minutes. Tiny flakes settling on your eyelashes until you blink them away. Your body reacts in strange ways. Shivering is constant, your muscles twitching without permission, a useless attempt to keep warm. But then, sometimes, the shivering stops, and that's worse. Numbness creeps up your legs, through your fingers, across your face. You touch your cheek, and it feels like someone else's skin. The snow has a way of convincing your body to give up, to let the cold take over. You've seen it before. A guy in your platoon fell asleep last week without enough cover. They found him blue, lips cracked, body stiff. The snow had wrapped him up like a blanket and never let go. Everyone said the same thing afterward. At least he looked peaceful. Peaceful isn't the goal, though. Surviving is. The snow muffles sound. That should be comforting, but it's not. It means you never quite know what's coming. A shell can whistle overhead, and you don't hear it until the blast shakes the ground. A squad can move just yards away, and their boots are softened by the powder. Even voices get lost, swallowed into the white silence. You whisper because you're told to, but whispering also feels natural here. Anything louder feels like breaking some unspoken rule. The snow demands quiet, and you obey, because who has the energy to argue with the sky? At night, the snow glows faintly under the moon, reflecting enough light to make shadows dance across the trees. You lie there, eyes open, and every branch looks like movement. Every shadow like a figure creeping closer. Sleep doesn't come easily. You pull your helmet low over your eyes, turn your body toward the wall of your foxhole, and pretend that the snow pressed against your back is just another blanket. But you know it isn't. Blankets comfort. That one suffocates. Every adjustment makes it worse. If you sit upright, your spine freezes against the dirt wall, moisture soaking through your jacket. If you lie down, your body melts a shallow pocket in the snow that quickly fills with icy water. You try kneeling, crouching, curling, but there's no winning position. Eventually, you settle for the one that hurts least, the one where your toes don't scream louder than your hips, where your shoulder doesn't throb harder than your back. Your feet are the real battleground. Snow seeps through the cracks in your boots, melting into socks already stiff with yesterday's moisture. You wriggle your toes, hoping to keep blood flowing, but it doesn't do much. The snow packs itself in around your ankles, clings to your laces, hardens into little ice blocks that refuse to let go. You've heard the lectures about trench foot, about frostbite. You know the warnings. But what can you do? You can't take the boots off. You can't hang socks by a fire that doesn't exist. You just keep moving your toes, hoping it's enough. The snow also hides everything. Mines, shell craters, dropped gear, frozen bodies. You've seen guys step wrong and vanish up to their thighs, boots wedged in some invisible hole. Others stumble over something half buried, only to realise it was someone's pack. Or worse, someone. The Ardennes doesn't give you the courtesy of clarity. Everything is covered in the same pale layer, equal parts camouflage and coffin lid. Sometimes you try to use the snow. Soldiers pack it into walls, stacking blocks like clumsy architects, trying to create windbreaks or overhead cover. The snow cooperates at first, firm under your gloves, stacking neatly. Then it collapses, avalanching into your hole, filling the space you spent hours clearing. You curse, dig it out, try again. The cycle repeats. It feels like fighting an enemy with infinite patience. The snow waits. You tire. Eventually you stop trying. Even eating is a snow-covered ordeal. Your rations freeze solid, wrappers stiff. Cans too cold to open without numbing your fingers. You hold food under your arm, against your body, waiting for it to thaw just enough to chew. Sometimes you scoop up snow, shove it into your mouth to quench thirst, only to regret it instantly as the cold drills into your teeth and freezes your tongue. You tell yourself you won't do it again, but you always do. Water is heavy, canteens run dry, and snow is everywhere. Convenience wins over sense. When you try to stand, your knees protest, stiff from hours pressed against icy ground. Snow clings to your trousers, cakes against your boots, and you stumble like you've been drinking. You brush yourself off, but the flakes stay embedded, woven into the fabric like they belong there. You step out of the foxhole, and the snow greets you again, knee-deep, heavy, dragging at every movement. You lift one foot, sink again, lift the other, sink again. Walking feels like punishment. Running is impossible. And yet, in some twisted way, the snow is also protection. It muffles noise, it hides you from distant eyes, it swallows tracks. A foxhole lined with snow blends into the landscape, invisible to anyone not standing right on top of it. The snow buries equipment, covers supply dumps, hides whole companies from aerial view. It's enemy and ally at once, indifferent to which side you're on. You try to make peace with it. You tell yourself it's just weather, just frozen water, nothing personal. But when you lie back down, when the flakes settle on your face and melt into your collar, when the ground leaches heat out of your body until your bones ache, you know the truth. The snow doesn't care about your peace. It's not here to comfort you. It's here to remind you, minute after minute, that survival is never guaranteed. The wind shifts, carrying a spray of flakes into your hole, dusting your helmet, your rifle, your chest. You close your eyes, let it settle, because brushing it off is pointless. The snow will be here long after you, long after the war, long after the trees themselves fall. For now, it's your bed, your blanket, and your enemy. You learn quickly that a foxhole isn't just a hole. It's a commitment, a punishment, and a strange sort of coffin you have to build yourself before the ground or the artillery does it for you. They tell you to dig 2 feet wide, 4 feet long, and as deep as you can before you collapse. That sounds easy on paper. Out here, it means swinging a shovel at dirt so frozen it might as well be concrete, chipping away like a prisoner with a spoon. Every scoop is a victory. Every clump of earth that finally gives way feels like a miracle. Even as sweat freezes on your face and the handle bites into your palms. The shovel isn't even a real shovel most of the time. It's a collapsible entrenching tool, half the size of what you'd want, with a blade that bends under pressure, and a handle that wobbles loose if you're not careful. You stab at the ground, twist, pry, and curse when the blade skitters off a rock. If you're lucky, you make progress. If you're not, you break the tool, and then it's your hands, raw and red, clawing at soil that laughs at you. There's no glamour in digging. You're on your knees, hunched over, shoulders screaming, breath puffing in clouds while you scrape at the ground like some desperate animal. Your back seizes up, your knees ache, your knuckles split open on hidden stones. Dirt fills your gloves, crawls into your sleeves, coats your face until you look less like a soldier and more like something the forest spit out. You keep at it anyway, because the alternative is lying flat on the open snow, waiting for the next shell to land. Foxholes are supposed to save you. They're supposed to absorb blasts, shield you from bullets, make you invisible to the enemy. That's what the manuals said, what the officers repeat. But when you're actually crouched inside one, you start to question it. The hole never feels deep enough. You imagine a shell landing nearby, shrapnel slicing down through the air, and you press yourself flat against the wall, as if 2 feet of frozen mud will keep you alive. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Either way, you dig deeper. You never dig alone if you can help it. A foxhole is usually a 2-man affair. One guy digs while the other watches, then you switch back and forth until both of you are exhausted. The hole becomes a shared space, your temporary home, your bed, your kitchen, your toilet, your everything. Privacy isn't part of the deal. You'll sit shoulder to shoulder with someone who snores, someone who mutters in their sleep, someone who steals more than their share of warmth at night. You'll smell their socks, hear their stomach growl, feel their elbow jabbing your ribs when they roll over. The foxhole is intimacy without choice. When the digging is finally done, you step back and look at your work. It doesn't look like much. Just a scar in the earth, a rectangle barely big enough to hold you. You climb inside, crouch down, and realise it's worse than it looked. The bottom is wet, the sides crumble if you lean on them, and the snow that you piled up as a makeshift wall just collapses back in with a single gust of wind. You start fixing, reinforcing, lining the walls with logs or pine branches if you can find them, jamming anything solid into place so it doesn't cave in on you while you sleep. You tell yourself it helps, though you know in your gut that nothing here is permanent. The first time you spend a night in one, the reality hits. You lower yourself into the hole, curl up with your rifle, and stare at the dirt wall inches from your face. You can hear your buddy breathing, the sound echoing louder than it should in the cramped space. You shift to get comfortable, but there is no comfort. The floor is uneven, your hip presses into a frozen lump of soil, and the walls radiate cold into your body. You pile pine boughs on the bottom, but they only mask the discomfort. They don't erase it. You might as well be lying on a bed of nails that smell faintly like sap and decay. Rain turns a foxhole into a swamp. Snow turns it into a freezer. Either way, water finds its way in. You wake up in the dark with your legs half submerged, boots squelching as you shift. You scoop the water out with your helmet, toss it over the side, and watch it immediately seep back in through the ground. It's a losing battle, but you fight it anyway, because letting the water rise means frostbite faster than you're already getting it. Rats find their way in too, big, bold, well fed on scraps from rations, and sometimes worse. They scurry along the walls, dart across your chest while you sleep, gnaw at your gear if you're not paying attention. You swat at them, curse them, but they come back. The hole is as much theirs as it is yours. You try not to think about what they've been chewing on before they reached you. Some soldiers get clever, try to make improvements. A little shelf carved into the wall for ammo. A stick jammed across the top for hanging wet socks. If you're lucky enough to have a poncho, you stretch it overhead to keep the snow out, though it just sags under the weight and dumps the load on you anyway. You learn to adjust expectations. Comfort is a myth. Survival is the only standard worth measuring against. Then there's the smell. Dirt, sweat, wet wool, smoke, gun oil, unwashed bodies. All of it collects in the hole, heavy and inescapable. You breathe it in, you wear it on your skin. It seeps into your clothes until it feels permanent. Fresh air is just a rumour carried by the wind. And even when you climb out, it clings to you. The foxhole becomes part of your body, a scent you can't shake. But as miserable as it is, you cling to it. The hole is yours. You dug it, you bled for it, you cursed at it, and now it's your lifeline. When artillery whistles overhead, you dive into it like it's salvation. You press yourself against the wall, curl into the mud, and wait for the blast. The ground shakes, dirt rains down, snow collapses from above, but you're still alive, and the foxhole takes the credit. You hate it, but you trust it. You start to think of the hole as a strange extension of yourself. You know every inch of it, every crack, every loose clump of dirt. You can feel when the walls shift, when the floor softens, when the snow drifts higher. It becomes your little universe, claustrophobic and suffocating, but familiar. Outside is chaos. Inside is your chaos. That small difference keeps you sane, or at least something close to it. When you climb out at dawn, stretching stiff limbs and shaking snow from your helmet, the hole looks like nothing. Just a depression in the earth, barely visible under the white blanket covering everything. But you know what it cost? Hours of labour, frozen fingers, a back that won't straighten properly. It's the worst bedroom you've ever had, but it's the only one you've got. And tonight, you'll crawl back into it, curl up again, and pretend for a few hours that the walls can keep out more than just the cold. The foxhole feels small enough when it's just you and the cold. But the moment you remember you're not the only living thing in the Ardennes, it gets smaller. Much smaller. You thought you built yourself a personal shelter. Something carved out of the ground that was yours alone. Then the mud oozes in, the snow slides down, and the visitors you never invited show up anyway, making themselves comfortable in the space you sweated, cursed, and froze to build. Mud is the first intruder. It arrives quietly, just a trickle at the edges when the ground softens, but soon enough the entire floor is coated. You sink into it every time you shift, boots suctioning down with that wet squelch that promises trench foot in a matter of days. You try to bail it out, scooping with your helmet, tossing it over the side. The water and muck seep right back in. It doesn't matter how much you shovel. The mud isn't a guest, it's a roommate. And like the worst roommate, it doesn't pay rent. It ruins everything you own. And it refuses to leave no matter how much you shout at it. Snow is no better. It sneaks in from above, piling silently while you doze, drifting down your collar, melting against your skin until you jerk awake with a shiver. You build little walls to keep it out. Pile branches overhead. Anything to stop the constant intrusion. The snow doesn't care. A single gust of wind, and it collapses everything you've rigged, dumping half a forest's worth of powder straight into your lap. You brush it off, curse under your breath, and it keeps falling. A steady stream of frozen insistence reminding you that gravity always wins. Then there are the creatures. Rats appear at night, fat, bold, and perfectly comfortable in the filth. They scurry across your chest, nibble at crumbs in your pockets, gnaw holes in ration boxes. You swat them away, kick at them, throw rocks when you have the energy. They always come back. You learn not to leave food unguarded, but even that doesn't guarantee safety. One soldier swore he woke up to find a rat chewing on his ear. Nobody doubted him. Everyone just nodded like, yeah, that sounds about right. Lice are more subtle, but far worse. They infest the seams of your uniform, crawl through your hair, bite at your skin until you scratch yourself raw. No one is spared. Officers, grunts, medics, everybody is a walking insect motel. You feel them moving under your collar, down your sleeves, in your socks. The itch never stops. You dig at your skin with dirty fingernails until you bleed, but the relief is temporary. They've already laid more eggs. They'll be back tomorrow, hungrier than before. Fleas too, though by now you've stopped distinguishing. You just call them all the itch. Everyone does. Your whole body hums with it, and the foxhole, damp and dark, is the perfect breeding ground. You scratch in silence beside your buddy, who's also scratching, and neither of you mention it. What's the point? It's not like there's a cure. Soap is a fantasy. Hot water, a fairy tale. You'll just itch until spring, if spring ever comes. Other guests arrive less often, but they're no less unwelcome. Frogs, somehow still alive under the ice, plop into your hole on rare warm nights, croaking like they own the place. Bugs burrow in from the dirt, tickling across your hands and face when you're too tired to swat them away. Once in a while, a stray dog or cat from a nearby village stumbles close, half-starved, eyes glowing in the dark. Some men share scraps, others chase them off. Nobody trusts them. Disease hides in every scratch, every bite, every lick of fur. And of course, you can't forget your human companion. Foxholes are meant for two, and you don't get to choose who the army pairs you with. Maybe it's a guy who snores so loud, you wonder if the Germans can hear him. Maybe it's someone who talks in his sleep, muttering nonsense about home, about food, about things he's seen that he won't say out loud when he's awake. Maybe it's someone you like, someone you trust, someone whose presence makes the night slightly less unbearable. Or maybe it's the opposite, someone you can't stand, someone who steals your cigarettes, hogs the blanket, elbows you every time he shifts. Either way, you're together, closer than family, pressed into mud and snow, forced to share body heat like reluctant lovers who both regret the arrangement. The foxhole is so tight, you know everything about the man beside you whether you want to or not. How he breathes, how he smells, the sound of his teeth grinding when he dreams. You both pretend not to notice, but there's no pretending in a hole this small. Every cough, every groan, every fart is shared. Intimacy isn't optional. It's mandatory, and it's exhausting. Sometimes the uninvited guests aren't living. They're reminders. Shrapnel from a shell. Jagged metal still hot when it slams into the dirt wall. Splinters from trees blasted apart overhead. Chunks of frozen earth that collapse when artillery shakes the ground. You sit there, pressed flat, while dirt rains into your collar and snow slides down your back, thinking about how fragile the walls really are. Your shelter is one lucky angle away from becoming your grave. And yet, despite all this, you stay. You curse the mud, brush away the snow, swat at the rats, scratch the lice, endure your buddy's snores, and huddle back down. Because as crowded, filthy, and infested as it is, the foxhole is still better than standing out in the open. Out there, you're a target. In here, you're just miserable but alive. So you share the space, with the mud sucking at your boots, with the snow weighing down your back, with the creatures crawling over your skin, with the stranger who's become your shadow. You let them in because you have no choice, because survival doesn't ask what you're comfortable with. It just asks if you're willing to keep going, even when your world shrinks down to a hole in the ground and all the unwelcome things that come with it. The first thing you notice when you crawl out of your hole isn't the sight of the forest or the sting of the cold. It's the smell. It hits you before your eyes even adjust to the dim light filtering through the trees. The Ardennes doesn't smell like pine or fresh snow, or any of the things you'd imagine from postcards of winter landscapes. It smells like war. And war has a fragrance that's impossible to forget once it gets into your nose. Wet wool dominates. Every man around you is wrapped in layers of it, coats and blankets that have soaked up snow, sweat, and smoke for weeks without ever being properly dried. Wool doesn't dry easily, and out here it never dries at all. It just sits on your back, heavy, damp, and sour. The stench rises every time you shift, like opening the lid on a forgotten laundry basket that's been left in the rain. You breathe it in because there's no choice, and it clings to you thick enough to taste. Mixed with that is the constant musk of unwashed bodies. Nobody has bathed in weeks. Soap is a memory. Clean water is too valuable to waste on something like hygiene. You sleep in your uniform, work in your uniform, fight in your uniform. It collects everything. Sweat from days of digging, grease from rations, mud from the foxhole floor. The smell builds layer by layer until it's something beyond body odour. Something sour, sharp, and overwhelming. You stop noticing your own scent after a while, but you can always smell the man next to you, and he can always smell you. It's a mutual misery pact, sealed in stink. Then there's gunpowder. Even when the shooting dies down, the residue lingers in the air. A sharp, acrid bite that sticks to your clothes, your gloves, your hair. It mixes with the wool and the sweat until a whole forest seems to hum with it. You wipe your rifle down, but the smell stays on your fingers, and you taste it every time you eat. Bread with a hint of cordite, chocolate with an undertone of burned powder. Coffee, if you're lucky enough to get some, with a smoky aftertaste that isn't from the beans. The earth itself adds to the perfume. Wet dirt, dug up and churned by shovels, soaked by melted snow, turned into mud that splashes onto boots and hands and never comes off. It has its own heavy scent, damp and mouldy, like rotting leaves ground into the soil. It fills your foxhole. It cakes onto your clothes. It seeps into your gloves. Every breath you take pulls in that dampness, reminding you that you're living closer to the ground than the animals ever had to. Smoke drifts constantly, even when you don't see flames. Fires lit in desperation for warmth, burning whatever scraps of wood or cardboard the soldiers can find. Cigarettes passed hand to hand, glowing embers that never fully go out. The smoke settles into everything. Jackets, scarves, blankets, until the whole forest smells like a campfire that no one enjoyed. The air is never clean. It's always laced with ash, heavy and dry, scratching at your throat when you cough. Food adds its own notes, and they're never pleasant. Cans of rations opened and abandoned, scraps left in the snow, the faint, sour tang of spoiled meat or beans that no one had the stomach to finish. Chocolate bars that went stale before they reached you. Biscuits so dry they crumble into dust, with a smell closer to sawdust than anything edible. Men chew anyway, because hunger doesn't care about flavour. But the odour of those rations lingers, stale and metallic, as if the cans themselves are rusting inside your gut. And then there are the darker scents. The things you don't talk about but can't avoid. Blood, sharp and coppery, soaking into the ground. Sometimes fresh, sometimes old, frozen into dark stains that never quite lose their edge. Burnt fabric, scorched skin, the aftermath of shells that landed too close. You breathe it in, whether you want to or not, and once you've smelled it, you never forget it. The forest carries that memory even when you're trying not to. Urine, feces, the unavoidable waste of too many men living too close together with nowhere to put it. Buckets tipped over, snowbanks used as toilets, foxholes that double as latrines when the shelling is too heavy to climb out. It's pungent, sour, and unavoidable. You wrinkle your nose at first, then stop, because wrinkling it does nothing. The smell doesn't fade. It blends into everything else until the whole forest is one thick stew of odours that refuses to let you go. The combination is overwhelming at first, but eventually your brain dulls to it. You stop gagging, stop flinching, stop trying to breathe shallow. You live in it, day after day, until it becomes the background, until you only notice when something new gets added to the mix. A blast nearby, and suddenly the acrid bite of burned powder sharpens. A body left too long under the snow, and suddenly a sweet, sickly note cuts through the wool and sweat. You can't escape it, and you don't even bother trying. And here's the strangest part. After a while, you associate it with safety. The stink means you're still here. If you can smell the wet wool, the sweat, the smoke, it means you're alive. You're still breathing. You've made it through another night, another shelling, another day without being buried under the snow yourself. The smell is awful, unbearable, unforgettable. And it's the one thing you start to cling to, because the alternative is silence. You think the foxhole is bad when it's just you in it. Cold, wet, cramped, smelling like a mouldy rug left out in the rain. But the truth is, you're rarely alone. 2 men to a hole, sometimes 3 if supplies are stretched thin, which means your misery is multiplied by whoever the army decided to drop next to you. It's less of a living arrangement and more of a forced marriage, the kind where you don't speak the language, don't like the food, and don't get a say in the vows. You share everything. Space, warmth, silence, fear. Even lice, especially lice. At first you think maybe it won't be so bad. Company is good, right? Someone to talk to when the shelling starts. Someone to keep watch while you doze. Someone to slap you awake if you start slipping into hypothermia. But then the hours stretch into days. The days stretch into weeks. And suddenly you're trapped in a hole the size of a refrigerator box with another grown man whose habits you know better than your own family's. The foxhole becomes less like a shelter and more like a badly written sitcom where no one is laughing and everyone smells. You can't pick your partner. That choice was made for you by some officer who thought in neat rows and numbers. Maybe you lucked out and ended up with someone you get along with. Maybe it's your buddy from training. Someone who knows your jokes and shares his smokes without complaint. But more often, it's a stranger. A stranger with quirks you discover by accident and then have to live with in intimate detail. Does he snore? You'll find out in the first 10 minutes of trying to sleep. Does he grind his teeth? You'll hear it echo in the silence, like someone slowly chewing on gravel. Does he talk in his sleep? Oh yes, you'll learn every rambling, feverish word, whispered inches from your ear while you're trying not to lose your mind. Snoring is bad enough on its own, but in a foxhole it feels like torture. The sound bounces off the dirt walls, reverberating until it's the only thing you can focus on. You jab him in the ribs, he rolls over, quiets for 5 minutes, then starts again, louder this time. You shove snow at his face, he grunts, half wakes, then drifts back into a snore so thunderous you wonder if the Germans can hear it across the line. You try earplugs, but you don't have any. You try stuffing cloth in your ears, but the cloth is wet. So you just lie there, staring at the dark ceiling of your hole, listening to the man next to you sawing logs, while frostbite creeps into your toes. And then there's the smell. One man in a hole stinks enough. 2 men double it, and the stench doesn't just add, it compounds. His wet wool mixed with yours, his sweat with your sweat, his unwashed socks baking in the same confined air. You try to shift your body to get away from it, but there's nowhere to go. The hole is too small. His armpit is inches from your face, his boots brushing your legs, his breath hot and sour in the cold night air. You turn your head and get a nose full of mud and rat droppings instead. There is no fresh air, only options of foulness. Body heat is supposed to help. That's what they told you anyway. Share a hole, share the warmth, keep each other alive when the temperature drops below freezing. And in some ways it works. You curl up back to back, your coats pressed together, radiating what little heat your bodies can muster. But the closeness is unbearable. Every twitch, every cough, every sigh is amplified by proximity. You shift your weight and bump into him. He stretches and elbows you in the ribs. You try to turn over and end up nose to nose, staring at each other like unwilling lovers trapped in a bad romance novel. You laugh about it the first time. After the 10th, there's no laughter left. Personal habits become front and centre. The man you're paired with might chew with his mouth open. He might mutter prayers under his breath at odd hours. He might pick at his feet obsessively, flicking off bits of skin that land in the shared mud floor. You don't get to complain because you have your own habits. Maybe you grind your teeth. Maybe you groan when your joints ache. Maybe you mutter in your sleep too. You both notice. You both silently keep score. The hole is too small for secrets. And let's talk about the bathroom problem. There isn't one. If you're lucky, you crawl out into the snow, dig a quick hole nearby, do your business, and cover it up before frostbite sets in. If you're not lucky, if the shelling is heavy, if the night is too cold, if leaving the foxhole feels like suicide, you improvise. Bottles, cans, corners of the hole that you swear you'll clean later, but never really do. Your partner knows. He smells it. You smell his too. You both pretend not to notice, because calling it out would only make the situation worse. You just add another layer to the stench and carry on. Conversations happen, but they're strange. Sometimes you talk about home, about family, about food you miss. He tells you about his mum's cooking, and you describe your dad's workshop. And for a moment the hole feels less like a grave. Other times, you sit in silence for hours. The only sound the drip of melting snow and the occasional distant blast. You run out of things to say quickly. The war eats up small talk, and neither of you wants to bring up the obvious, that one of you might not be here tomorrow. So you settle for silence, broken only by the rhythm of breath, the crunch of boots when someone passes overhead, the scurry of rats along the walls. Arguments happen too. He takes too much space. He steals more than his share of the blanket. He smokes the last cigarette without offering you a drag. Tempers flare quickly in confined quarters, but they die just as fast. Where would you go if you stormed out? There's no couch to sleep on, no spare room to retreat to. Just snow and gunfire outside. So you both grumble, curse under your breath, then settle back into miserable coexistence. The foxhole becomes its own little world, its own twisted version of domestic life. You split chores, unspoken agreements about who bails the water out, who goes on watch, who digs the walls deeper when they collapse. You share cigarettes, split rations, pass a canteen back and forth. You might hate each other, but you're bound together by the whole. If one of you slacks, the other suffers. If one of you breaks down, the other has to pick up the slack. Dependence without choice. Partnership without affection. At night, when the shelling gets close, you huddle down together, pressed shoulder to shoulder, faces turned toward the dirt. You feel him trembling beside you, and you know he feels your hands shaking too. You don't say anything, but the closeness is its own language. Fear translated into silence, trust forced by proximity. You realise you're tied to this man in ways you never wanted, and in the morning you'll still be tied, still sharing the whole, still sharing everything. Sometimes he talks. Stories about home, about girlfriends, about cars and baseball and things that don't exist in the forest. You listen, not because you care, but because it fills the silence. Other times you talk, rambling about things you never thought you'd say out loud. Embarrassing stories, confessions, half-formed dreams. The whole squeezes it out of you. The closeness makes honesty slip easier, as if the mud and snow absorb the shame. You both know you'll never repeat it later. Outside the hole you'll pretend it never happened. Inside, it's just survival. And then there are the nights when neither of you speaks. Just breathing, shifting, scratching at lice, trying not to think about what's coming tomorrow. The silence presses heavier than the dirt overhead. You start to wonder if this is what marriage feels like, except marriage usually comes with a bed, a roof, and the chance to walk away if it goes bad. Here, you just keep lying side by side, waiting for morning, waiting for orders, waiting for the war to end. The foxhole roommate experience isn't a friendship. It's not even camaraderie, not really. It's forced proximity until you either tolerate each other or lose your mind. Sometimes, against the odds, you form a bond. He becomes your brother. Someone you'd risk your life for, because you already risk your sanity every night beside him. Other times, you count the days until you're reassigned, silently wishing he'd come down with trench foot, so you could finally stretch out alone. Either way, you endure. You always endure, because there's no alternative. So you settle back into the mud, shoulder to shoulder, the stink of his breath mixing with yours, the sound of his snore vibrating through the walls. You try to close your eyes and ignore the lice crawling under your collar, the rat scratching at the edge of the hole, the snow dripping from above. You remind yourself that it could be worse. You could be out there, alone, with no one to share the watch, no one to shake you awake when the cold gets too deep. Misery loves company, and in the foxhole, company is the only guarantee. You don't have to like him. You don't even have to talk to him. But when you're crammed in a dirt hole in the Ardennes, freezing, stinking, scratching, and waiting for the next shell to land, you realise you need him, and he needs you. That's the foxhole roommate experience. Too close for comfort, too vital to escape. You can't really call it food. Food implies warmth, flavour, and at least a passing attempt at enjoyment. What you get in the Ardennes is rations, and rations in winter are less about eating and more about surviving. The army calls them K rations, or C rations, neat little packages sealed up in cardboard or tin. But out here, when the snow piles up and your fingers don't bend properly anymore, they feel less like meals and more like cruel jokes mailed straight from the Pentagon. The first battle isn't opening the package. The first battle is your hands. Your gloves are wet, your fingers stiff, your nails cracked and bleeding. You try to peel the wrapper back on a ration bar, and your hands don't cooperate. They fumble. They slip. You curse. Blow hot air onto your fingers, rub them against your knees, try again. The paper tears wrong, leaving crumbs in the folds. You claw at it with your teeth, biting through waxy cardboard, spitting bits into the snow. Already the food tastes worse, and you haven't even swallowed any yet. Canned goods are another level of misery. A tin of meat or beans sounds manageable until you realise the can opener is somewhere in the bottom of your pack, frozen shut, coated with mud. You dig it out, pry at the lid, the metal biting at your raw hands. Sometimes the can explodes with a metallic pop, food spraying onto your gloves, steaming in the cold for all of 5 seconds before freezing into a crust you'll be licking off later. Other times, the can won't budge, no matter how much you twist. You hand it to your buddy, he fails too, and eventually you both stab at it with bayonets like cavemen rediscovering violence. When it finally opens, you don't celebrate. You just sigh and spoon cold, jelly-like lumps of what's supposed to be dinner into your mouth, chewing mechanically, swallowing without taste. The food itself doesn't care about you. The biscuits crumble into dust that sticks to the roof of your mouth, choking you until you wash it down with a sip of water you don't trust, or a swallow of coffee substitute that tastes like burned cardboard. The meat, if you can call it meat, comes out of the can in grey clumps, slick with fat that congeals instantly in the freezing air. You scrape at it, choke it down, tell yourself you're lucky to have it at all. Some men trade their cans, swapping beans for meat, meat for biscuits, anything to break the monotony. But it never breaks. It just shifts sideways, one flavourless misery replacing another. Chocolate bars should be the bright spot. Sweet, comforting, a reminder of home. Except out here they're so frozen solid, you could hammer nails with them. You bite down, and your teeth scream in protest, gums aching, fillings threatening to jump ship. You suck on it instead, waiting for it to thaw in your mouth, the sweetness slow to appear, mixed with the metallic tang of the wrapper and the sour taste of your own unwashed breath. By the time it softens, you don't want it anymore, but you chew anyway, because calories are calories, and calories keep you from collapsing in the snow. Sometimes you get lucky, and there's coffee powder in the pack. You scoop it into your canteen cup, add snow, hold it over a tiny flame. The snow melts into water, the powder dissolves unevenly, and what you end up with isn't coffee so much as brown liquid that smells faintly of home but tastes like regret. It's lukewarm by the time you sip it, bitter, gritty, with flakes of ash drifting from the fire. Still, it's the best thing you've had all week, and you guard it like treasure, sipping slowly, pretending for a moment that you're in a diner instead of a frozen forest where death drops out of the sky. Cigarettes are included in some ration packs, and they're the real prize. Food you tolerate, cigarettes you savour. Lighting one in the snow, though, is another test of endurance. Your hands shake, the match won't strike, the wind blows out every spark. You huddle low, shielding the flame with your body, teeth clenched around the cigarette like it's oxygen itself. When the end finally glows, you inhale, and the smoke burns hot and dry against your throat. It mixes with the wool and gunpowder already thick in the air, but for a moment you don't care. For a moment you're human again. Your fingers, though, are always the problem. Eating in the cold isn't just unpleasant, it's dangerous. You pull off your gloves to manage the wrappers, the cans, the little cardboard boxes. Within seconds, your hands go numb, skin reddening, knuckles stiffening until you can barely bend them. You rush, tearing at food with frantic movements, stuffing your mouth before you lose the ability to feel anything at all. You blow into your palms, rub them together, jam them back into wet gloves that only half protect you. The ache returns immediately, a deep, gnawing throb that no amount of flexing can fix. Sharing rations becomes its own strange economy. A man with too many biscuits trades for cigarettes. Another offers chocolate for coffee. Someone else hoards his cans, guarding them like gold, eating in silence while the others curse him under their breath. You learn quickly who's generous and who isn't. Some split everything down the middle, passing bites back and forth in the hole. Others squirrel away their best pieces, chewing in the dark so no one notices. You can't blame them. Hunger makes everyone selfish. Survival makes everyone selfish. The worst part isn't even the food, it's the act of eating itself. Sitting in the snow, fumbling with frozen hands, lifting cold lumps of ration to your lips while artillery thuds in the distance. You chew while the ground shakes, swallow while your buddy curses under his breath, take another bite while rats circle the edges of the hole. You never taste anything fully because taste requires calm, and calm doesn't exist here. You eat because you have to, not because you want to. Each swallow is another small victory, another reminder that your body still has enough strength to keep going. Your stomach never feels satisfied. The calories are there, just enough to keep you alive, but the hunger gnaws anyway. You dream about food constantly. Hot meals, plates piled high with things you haven't seen in months. Fresh bread, steaming soup, roasted meat that falls apart at the touch of a fork. You wake up with your mouth watering, only to find the same tin of beans waiting, the same biscuit, the same chocolate bar hard as a brick. You choke it down, close your eyes, pretend it's something better. Pretend long enough, and maybe you can trick your body into believing it. Sometimes the rations freeze solid in your pack, cans turning to blocks of ice, biscuits brittle enough to shatter. You hold them under your arm, under your coat, letting body heat thaw them just enough to bite. It takes forever, and by the time they soften, you're already shivering harder. You wonder if the calories you gain are worth the heat you lose. Probably not. But you eat anyway, because not eating is worse. And always, always, your fingers suffer most. Clumsy, cracked, bleeding fingers that fumble wrappers, drop spoons, spill precious crumbs into the snow. You watch food vanish into the white ground, and you swear it mocks you, the flakes swallowing up the one thing you needed. You scrape at the snow, dig with your nails, recover soggy crumbs, and shove them into your mouth anyway. Dignity doesn't survive the winter. Hunger kills it quickly. By the end, you're not eating food. You're consuming fuel. Cold rations shoveled into a cold mouth with colder fingers. You chew, swallow, and move on. Not because you enjoy it, but because the alternative is weakness. Weakness means death. So you force yourself to eat the beans, the biscuits, the chocolate bars that feel like rocks. You light a cigarette if you're lucky, sip coffee if you're luckier, and tuck your numb fingers back into gloves that offer no real comfort. The rations are cold, your hands are colder, and both will be waiting for you again tomorrow, as certain as the snow that never stops falling. The fantasy always starts the same way. You imagine waking up to the smell of coffee, rich and warm, drifting through the air like a promise. Maybe your mother brewed it in the kitchen back home. Maybe it's a diner on a street corner, the kind where the waitress tops off your cup without asking. Maybe it's just a buddy passing you a steaming mug in a tent, safe and dry. The fantasy is so strong you can almost taste it, the bitterness balanced by sugar, the heat sliding down your throat and into your chest like a small miracle. But when you open your eyes in the Ardennes, there's no mug, no steam, no miracle. Just a frozen canteen that rattles like a block of ice every time you shake it. Water is heavy, so you never carry much. What you do have freezes solid overnight. You tip the canteen toward your lips, and nothing comes out. You bang it against your knee, shake it, even bite at the mouthpiece in frustration. But the ice doesn't budge. Sometimes you hold it under your coat, close to your body, hoping your own heat will thaw it. All you get is a wet patch of uniform and a trickle of slush that tastes faintly of rust and disappointment. That's why men dream about coffee. Not because it's fancy, not because it's comforting, but because it's hot. Heat is the luxury, not flavour. The army knows this, which is why they stuff packets of instant coffee into ration boxes. A little brown powder sealed in foil, light enough to carry, bitter enough to wake the dead. The problem is, making it requires water, fire, and time. And in the Ardennes, you're always short on all three. You scoop snow into your canteen cup, hold it over a small flame if you dare. The snow shrinks into a puddle, dirty flecks of ash and pine needles floating in it. You stir in the powder, the crystals dissolving unevenly, clumping at the bottom. The result is closer to brown water than coffee, lukewarm at best by the time you sip it. But when it hits your mouth, it feels like salvation. Bitter, gritty, half cold already, but it's hot enough to thaw your teeth, warm enough to remind you what comfort used to taste like. Getting that small miracle, though, takes work. Firewood is scarce. Gathering sticks risks giving away your position. Matches are few, and the wind laughs at every spark. Some men huddle in groups, shielding flames with their bodies, desperate to keep the fire alive long enough to boil an inch of water. Others don't bother, chewing the powder straight from the packet, bitter granules sticking to their tongue and teeth. It makes your mouth feel like sandpaper, your stomach twist, your throat burn. But for a few minutes, you're awake, and that's enough. The ritual of coffee becomes more important than the drink itself. Opening the packet, pouring the powder, lighting the flame, stirring with the handle of a spoon. It feels almost civilized, like a routine from home smuggled into hell. Men guard their cups like treasures, sipping slowly, holding them close to their lips, eyes closed as if trying to block out the forest around them. For a few minutes, the war is quiet, and all that exists is the faint bitterness of coffee shared between shivering hands. Canteens, though, never cooperate. If they aren't frozen, they're filthy. You fill them with melted snow, but snow isn't clean. It carries dirt, ash, sometimes blood. It tastes of smoke and pine needles, or worse, of whatever dead thing lies buried upstream. The army says to purify it with iodine tablets, but the tablets taste worse than the snow. Metallic, chemical, chokingly bitter. You gag the first time, then swallow anyway, because what's the alternative? Dysentery? Typhus? Stomach cramps that bend you double while shells land overhead? You learn to prefer bitterness. When the canteen does thaw, the water is always too cold. You swallow and feel it hit your stomach like ice, curling your insides into knots. Your teeth ache from the shock. Your throat spasms. Your body shivers harder than before. You drink anyway, because thirst is worse than cold. Men ration sips carefully, arguing with themselves over whether to drink now or save it for later. Later usually wins, until the thirst grows unbearable and you cave, tilting the canteen back, gulping until it's empty again. Then you're back to scooping snow, watching it melt into slush, repeating the cycle. Every soldier has a trick. Some tuck the canteen inside their coat, using body heat to keep it liquid. Some bury it in the snow, thinking the insulation will stop it from freezing solid. Some just accept it, banging the ice block against rocks until it cracks into shards small enough to suck. You see men chewing on chunks of ice like candy, their lips cracked and bleeding, their tongues raw from the cold. They wince but keep chewing, because at least it's water, and at least it doesn't cost matches they don't have. Coffee powder turns into currency. Men trade it for cigarettes, for biscuits, for favours. A packet of instant coffee is worth more than a chocolate bar, sometimes more than meat. It's the closest thing to comfort in a place designed to strip you of it. You hoard it if you can, counting the packets in your kit like gold coins. You decide when to use them carefully after a long night on watch, before a march, when your body feels too heavy to lift another shovel. Each packet is a decision, each cup a rare moment of warmth. But even coffee can betray you. Sometimes you spill the cup. Sometimes the fire dies before it boils. Sometimes a shell lands too close, and you dive for cover. Your precious drink spilling into the mud. You curse louder at that than at the shell. You can survive the explosion if you're lucky. Losing the coffee feels like the real death. There are moments, though, rare and fleeting, when it all comes together. The snow melts clean, the fire holds steady, the powder dissolves just enough, and the cup warms your hands while the steam fogs your face. You sip, slow and careful, and for a moment you're not in the Ardennes. You're not in a hole, surrounded by snow and mud and fear. You're just a man drinking coffee, the way men have done for centuries, the way you used to back home. And for that moment, however brief, you almost feel human again. But the moment always ends. The cup empties, the fire burns out, the canteen freezes again. You tuck it under your arm, stomp your boots against the snow, and get back to surviving. Coffee dreams fade, frozen canteens remain, and the forest doesn't care whether you're thirsty or not. You swallow the bitterness, inside and out, and carry on. Because tomorrow, if you're lucky, there might be another packet, another cup, another fleeting taste of warmth in a world made of ice. Wool is supposed to be warm. That's the promise anyway. Back home, your mother or your grandmother might have sworn by it. Sweaters in winter, blankets on the bed, socks knitted thick to keep your feet from freezing. Wool was the material of comfort, something you wrapped yourself in while snow fell harmlessly outside. Out here, though, in the Ardennes, wool becomes something else entirely. It's still everywhere. Your coat, your trousers, your gloves, your socks. But it doesn't feel like comfort anymore. It feels like a curse. And the problem is simple. Wool absorbs water. It doesn't just absorb it, it clings to it like a jealous lover. Once it's wet, it never truly dries. Not in December, not in a foxhole, not when the sun barely shows its face and the air itself feels like an ice bath. You sweat during a march? The wool drinks it up. Snow falls, it melts against your body. The wool drinks that too. Mud splashes, rain drizzles. You spill a sip of coffee. The wool takes it all in, holds it, and refuses to let it go. So you wrap yourself up in layers of damp misery. Your coat is heavy, sagging, the fibres swollen with days' worth of moisture. Your socks squelch with every step, toes stewing in a swamp you carry everywhere you go. Your gloves, thin and worn, stiffen into claws that make your fingers ache just trying to bend. You peel a layer off and steam rises. Not because you're warm, but because your body heat is slowly cooking the dampness trapped against your skin. You put the layer back on, because what's the alternative? Bare flesh against the wind. You already know how that ends. The smell is another punishment. Wet wool doesn't smell like anything civilized. It reeks of sheep and mould. A sour barnyard stench that mixes with your own sweat until the whole forest feels like a petting zoo abandoned in a swamp. Every time you shift, the odour wafts up. It clings to your nose, your mouth, your hair. You taste it when you eat. Breathe it in when you try to sleep. Carry it with you, even when you climb out of the hole. There's no escaping it. You could blindfold yourself and still know you were in the Ardennes by smell alone. The itch comes next. Wool itches even when it's dry, rubbing against your skin like sandpaper. Wet, it's worse. It clings tighter. Fibres prickling every inch they touch, raising rashes that swell and fester under the constant damp. You scratch until you bleed, but scratching only makes it worse, spreading the irritation until your whole body hums with it. Some men jam pine needles under their collars, thinking it'll create a barrier. Others rub snow into their skin, desperate to numb the itch. Nothing works. The wool always wins, and the weight, God, weight. A wool coat already feels solid enough to stop a bullet when it's dry. Wet, it doubles, triples. You drag it with you like a millstone, shoulders aching, back bent under the load. Every march is slower, every movement harder. When you finally collapse into your hole at night, the coat doesn't come off. It's too cold to remove, too wet to bother. You just curl up in it, letting it stiffen into a shell around you. A soggy cocoon that traps both cold and heat in the worst possible balance. Your socks are the real killers. Wool socks sound good in theory, but once they're wet, they never dry. You peel them off, and they steam in the air, stiff with filth, reeking so badly your body turns away. You hold them near a fire if you're lucky enough to have one, but all you get is smoke and the faint smell of burning hair. Put them back on, and they squelch instantly. Don't put them back on, and your bare feet freeze solid. Either way, your toes suffer. Blisters pop, skin peels, nails blacken. You start to wonder if your feet are even worth saving, if maybe you should just give them to the frost and be done with it. Gloves aren't much better. Thin wool gloves, stretched and worn, already full of holes before you're even shipped out. Once they're wet, they stiffen, curling your fingers into claws you can't straighten. You try to hold your rifle, but the trigger feels slippery, the stock slimy. You peel the gloves off, try to work bare-handed, and immediately regret it. The metal of your weapon bites at your skin, freezing to it like glue. You rip your hand free and leave a patch of flesh behind. You slide the gloves back on, damp and stinking, and curse the choice you never really had. Some men try tricks, stuffing straw inside boots to soak up the wet, wrapping rags around hands before sliding gloves back on, layering everything, 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of gloves, coat on coat until they can barely move. It doesn't matter. The wool underneath is still wet, still heavy, still clinging. All they've done is trap more misery against their skin. And there's no replacement. You don't have extra coats, extra socks, extra anything. What you were issued is what you have. And what you have is always damp. Laundry is a joke. Where would you even wash them? In the same snow that soaks them already. In the same icy streams that carry filth downstream. And even if you could wash them, how would you dry them? Fires are rare, sunlight is rarer, and time is non-existent. So you just keep wearing the same layers, day after day, week after week, until they stink, itch, and weigh you down like chains. The men start to look the same. Everyone wrapped in stiff, sagging wool, collars turned up, scarves frozen solid against their necks, coats crusted with frost, trousers stiff at the knees, gloves dangling loose at the fingertips. You can't tell one man from another except by his voice. They're all just shapes of damp cloth trudging through snow, wrapped in misery, wrapped in wool that never dries. At night, you curl up in it, every fold clinging to you, every seam pressing against raw skin. You shift, trying to find comfort, but the wool moves with you, dragging moisture across your body like a sponge. You dream of dry clothes, of slipping into something soft and clean, of the luxury of cotton sheets. You wake up to wool glued to your back, wool stiff around your arms, wool heavy on your chest. The dream fades instantly. The wool remains. And the worst part is, you need it. As much as you hate it, as much as it itches, stinks, and weighs you down, you can't take it off. Without it, you'd freeze. Without it, the cold would sink into your bones and stop your heart before dawn. The wool is both tormentor and saviour, a miserable blanket that keeps you alive just enough to keep hating it. You curse it every day, scratch at it every night, and still wrap yourself tighter in it because you have no choice. The wool doesn't care if you're dry. The forest doesn't care if you're comfortable. The wool doesn't care if you itch yourself raw. You keep marching in it, keep sleeping in it, keep stinking in it, because survival doesn't ask what you like. It just asks what you can endure. And in the Ardennes, you endure wool that never dries. Your body wasn't built for this kind of cold. It doesn't matter if you grew up in Michigan winters or worked on farms where frost settled on the fields in October. Nothing prepares you for the Ardennes in December 1944. The cold here is a different species altogether. It's not the kind that makes you shiver for a minute and then laugh it off when you step inside. This is the kind of cold that crawls into your boots, into your gloves, under your skin, and refuses to leave. It gnaws at you constantly, a slow, steady bite that leaves souvenirs behind, whether you like it or not. The first one you notice is frostbite. At first it doesn't even hurt. That's the trick. It starts with numbness, a tingling in your fingers or toes that you mistake for ordinary cold. You wiggle them, rub them, shove them closer to your body's body heat. Sometimes the feeling comes back, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, you start to worry. The skin goes pale, then white, then bluish grey. You tap at your toes and feel nothing. You dig your fingernails into your palms and there's no response. You know the stories, you've seen the warnings. And you remember the guy last week, the one they had to carry because his feet were black by morning. The army tells you to keep moving, keep blood flowing, change your socks, dry your boots. Good advice, in theory. In practice, it's a cruel joke. Your socks are never dry. Your boots are frozen blocks of leather that squeeze the circulation right out of you. Marching helps, but only until you stop. Once you're back in the hole, crouched in the snow, the cold reclaims everything you gained. You stare at your toes, flex them weakly, whisper encouragement like they're small children who might listen. Don't leave me. Stay alive. But the cold doesn't bargain. Trenchfoot is frostbite's uglier cousin, and it thrives in the Ardennes. Constant dampness, no chance to dry, feet stewing in their own sweat and mud day after day. You peel off your socks and the skin comes with them, soft and peeling, greyish-white like something already dead. The smell is unbearable, sour and rotting, a stench that fills the hole even with snow blowing overhead. You rub your feet, massage them, curse them, but nothing helps. The pain is sharp at first, then dull, then absent altogether. That's the danger. When it stops hurting, it means the damage is done. Men limp everywhere. You see them hobbling down trails, dragging one foot behind the other, boots tied loose to make space for swollen flesh. Some can't walk at all. Medics cut the boots open, peel them back like old fruit, and reveal feet that don't look like feet anymore. Bloated, blistered, discoloured, leaking fluids that freeze as soon as they touch the air. The medic shakes his head, mutters something about evacuation, and you know that man won't be back. He'll lose the foot, maybe the leg, and maybe that's a blessing compared to staying in the forest another week. Frostbite and trenchfoot aren't the only souvenirs. The cold brings everything with it. Your lips crack until they bleed. Your nose runs constantly, freezing into little icicles you wipe away with gloves already crusted in snot. Your cheeks burn red, then peel raw. You cough until your chest aches, each breath a frozen rasp that cuts your throat. Some men hack up blood, little flecks staining the snow, but they keep coughing anyway, because what else can they do? There's no doctor waiting with a stethoscope, no warm bed to collapse into. There's just the hole, the cold, the hacking, and the slow awareness that your body is failing one part at a time. Hands suffer worst of all. Without them, you can't eat, can't shoot, can't even dig the hole you need to survive. The gloves are thin, the wool soaked, the leather stiff. You try to flex your fingers, but they curl into claws, refusing to obey. You press them against your stomach, your thighs, your armpits, anything warm enough to thaw them. It helps for a few minutes, then the numbness creeps back. You drop your rifle once, twice, cursing yourself, cursing the gloves, cursing the snow. A buddy has to pick it up for you. His hands know better than yours. Both of you laughing in that grim, broken way that doesn't sound like laughter at all. And then there are the infections. Cuts on your hands that never heal. Scratches from digging in frozen earth. Blisters on your feet that turn red, then yellow, then black. You can't keep them clean. You can't keep anything clean. Dirt and lice and mud grind into the wounds, and soon enough, they fester. The medic gives you sulphur powder if he has any left, but usually he doesn't. So you wrap it in rags, ignore the swelling, and hope it doesn't spread. Hope isn't much of a medical treatment, but it's the only one you've got. Some soldiers joke about these things. They hold up their swollen feet, wiggle blackened toes, and make wisecracks about souvenirs to take home. Here's one for the mantle, they say, or maybe I'll get a discount on shoes. The laughter is forced, bitter, too loud in the quiet of the forest. No one actually wants these souvenirs. They're just easier to laugh at than to face. You don't think about what happens when the medic says it's too far gone, when they pull out the saw, when you wake up in a field hospital, missing a part of yourself. You don't think about it, because thinking about it makes the cold worse. Sleep only adds to the danger. You curl up, exhausted, and drift into shallow dreams, and the cold seizes the chance. Your body slows down, circulation weaker, toes and fingers giving up one by one. You wake with your hands stiff, your feet numb, panic rising in your chest as you pound them against the ground, rub them until the pain comes roaring back. The pain is relief. The pain means they're still alive. You thank the pain like it's a gift, clutch it tight, even as it brings tears to your eyes. The forest doesn't care. It doesn't care about frostbite or trench foot or coughs that won't stop. It doesn't care that you wrap your feet in extra rags, that you shove your hands under your arms, that you dream about warmth every night. The cold just keeps gnawing, slow and steady, until it leaves its mark. Nobody leaves the Ardennes whole. Everyone takes something back, whether it's a missing toe, a limp, scars that don't heal, or the memory of pain that wakes you up years later when the wind rattles the windows in winter. You tell yourself it's temporary. The war will end, the cold will pass, the sun will rise again someday. But right now, huddled in the foxhole, you rub your numb feet, flex your stiff fingers, cough into your sleeve, and remind yourself of the truth. The Ardennes gives gifts freely, and none of them are the kind you'd ever want to keep. A helmet isn't just a helmet in the Ardennes. Sure, it's supposed to stop shrapnel from turning your brain into soup, but out here, it becomes everything else too. You start to realise that the steel pot strapped to your head is less about protection and more about versatility. It's your cookware, your pillow, your bucket, your sink, your snow scoop, your emergency chamber pot. It's the single most miserable piece of equipment you own, and yet it's also the one thing you can't live without. Cooking with a helmet sounds clever until you actually try it. You scrape snow into it, hold it over a tiny flame, and watch as the inside starts to blacken with soot. The snow melts into a puddle, flecked with ash and whatever dirt was clinging to the metal. You stir in powdered coffee or a chunk of ration, and suddenly your drinking water tastes like burned metal and smoke. The flavour never washes out. Every sip carries that faint tang of iron, reminding you that your mug has also spent the last week strapped to your sweaty scalp. You choke it down anyway, because what else are you going to use? The army didn't issue China. Food is no better. You crack open a can of meat, dump it into the helmet, and warm it over a fire. The grease bubbles, spits, coats the steel in a layer of fat that hardens the instant you take it off the flame. You scrape at it with your spoon, shovel the lumps into your mouth, and tell yourself you're eating stew. Really, you're eating desperation flavoured with iron and soot. The helmet never gets clean. No amount of snow, no amount of rubbing with a rag ever scrubs off that layer of grime. You just add more with each use, until the inside is a crusty mix of old grease, char, and whatever fell into it while you weren't looking. And you still strap it to your head afterward. The same helmet that boiled your coffee now covers your hair. The same helmet that warmed your beans now rubs against your forehead. The smell follows you everywhere. Burned fat, smoke, sour sweat baked into metal. You can't escape it. You don't even try anymore. The helmet is part of you now. A filthy extension of your body that carries your stink as faithfully as your coat does. When you're not cooking with it, you're using it as a pillow. Pillow is generous. Really, you're just setting your head on cold steel and pretending it's better than nothing. You flip it upside down, stuff a rag inside if you're lucky, and rest your cheek against the rim. It digs into your ear, presses against your temple, leaves a red line across your face when you wake. You shift positions constantly, trying to find a spot that doesn't make your neck ache. There isn't one. The helmet wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for utility, and utility doesn't care if you get a good night's sleep. Some men line their helmets with socks before using them as pillows. Others use their packs instead, but the pack is always lumpy, full of hard edges that jab you in the ribs. So you go back to the helmet, because at least it's familiar. You close your eyes, press your face into it, and drift off with the faint taste of iron lingering on your lips. If you're lucky, the cold numbs you enough to forget how uncomfortable it is. If you're not, you wake every hour, shifting, grumbling, your neck stiffening into knots. By morning, you hate it more than ever, but you still strap it back on because hate doesn't change necessity. The helmet is also your bucket. You don't talk about this part much, but everyone knows it. When shelling is heavy, when leaving the hole means risking your life, you use what you have. You tilt it away from your body, crouch awkwardly, and do what has to be done. The stench lingers no matter how much snow you dump in afterward. You rinse it once, twice, maybe 3 times if you can spare the effort, but nothing erases it completely. And eventually, yes, that same helmet goes back on your head. You swallow your pride with the same bitterness as your cold rations, because survival never asks about dignity. The helmet carries water when you need it. You scoop snow, let it melt, carry it back to your hole. You bale mud out of the foxhole with it, scraping at the icy sludge pooling at your boots. You collect rain in it, tilt it under drips from the trees, anything to catch a little more water. It becomes your sink when you wash, though wash is a generous term for splashing icy water on your face, rubbing grime into your skin instead of out. You spit into it after brushing your teeth with a rag, dump it, then cook in it again later. It's a cycle of filth you stop questioning after the first week. The sound of the helmet is another constant. It clanks against your rifle, scrapes against tree branches, rattles every time you set it down. When shells land close, dirt rains into it with a tinny ping, like some cruel reminder that even the earth mocks you. When you march, the strap digs into your chin, rubbing it raw, leaving sores that never heal. You loosen it and risk the helmet flying off when you stumble. You tighten it and feel it cutting into your skin. There's no winning, just another choice between discomforts. Sometimes the helmet saves lives. Shrapnel glances off, bullets deflect, debris bounces away. Men lift them afterward, dented and scorched, holding them up like trophies. They laugh, a harsh sound that doesn't reach their eyes, and put them back on anyway. Because even dented, even burned, even lined with filth, the helmet still does its job. You curse it one moment and thank it the next. Hate and dependence wrapped in steel. At night, you listen to the forest. Helmet pressed against your ears, amplifying every sound. Rats scurrying, branches snapping, distant artillery rolling like thunder. The metal hums faintly with every vibration, a reminder that you're never alone, never safe, never far from the next strike. You take it off sometimes, rest it beside you, just for silence. But then the fear creeps in. What if a shell lands? What if shrapnel flies? You slide it back on, close your eyes, and accept the weight on your head like a curse you can't shake. The helmet is heavy, uncomfortable, filthy, and absolutely essential. You cook in it, sleep on it, piss in it, wash with it, protect your skull with it. It carries every smell, every stain, every memory of the forest. You hate it with the same intensity you hate the snow, the mud, the cold. And yet, when you march through the Ardennes, when you crouch in your foxhole, when you dream about home, the helmet is always there. Not just on your head, but in your life. It's not just equipment, it's survival, miserable and undeniable. And tomorrow, when you wake stiff and cold, when you scoop snow for coffee, when you dump water out of your hole, when you rest your head for a few stolen minutes of sleep, you'll reach for it again. Because out here, a helmet isn't just a helmet. It's everything you never wanted it to be, and everything you can't live without. The Ardennes looks like a forest, and at first you might think that's a blessing. Trees everywhere, tall trunks, thick branches, pine needles heavy with snow. In your imagination, it's cover, it's material, it's shelter waiting to happen. You picture yourself stacking logs like Lincoln, weaving pine boughs into a roof, camouflaging your position so neatly that even God would have trouble finding you. That's the fantasy. The reality is that the forest is as much an enemy as the cold, and the things you use to hide yourself only add to the misery. The first lesson you learn is that pine boughs don't last. You cut them, drag them into your hole, line the bottom with them, and for about an hour you feel like a genius. The needles cushion the ground, smell sharp and fresh, even give you the illusion of warmth. You think maybe you've beaten the system, maybe this miserable hole has turned into something almost livable. Then the needles start breaking under your weight. They flatten, snap, and mix with the mud. By morning, your mattress is nothing more than a soggy layer of broken twigs glued to your coat with ice. The fresh smell turns sour, damp, mouldy. You spend the rest of the day picking needles out of your socks, your hair, your gloves, wondering why you thought sleeping on branches would be anything but a joke. Logs are the next disappointment. They're heavy, they're frozen solid, and dragging them through knee-deep snow feels like punishment. You and your buddy curse as you heave one across the clearing, shoulders burning, feet slipping. You finally wedge it over your hole, thinking it'll be sturdy cover, maybe even stop shrapnel. But frozen wood cracks easily, especially when artillery is falling nearby. A blast shatters your masterpiece, sending splinters raining into your face, and suddenly your roof is in pieces. You drag another log, another branch, patch it together again. It collapses under snow. You start over, and by the third time, you realise the logs aren't working for you. You're working for them like some medieval serf chopping wood for a master who isn't even watching. Camouflage is another cruel joke. You take pine boughs, stick them in the snow around your hole, cover the edges until it blends with the ground. From a distance, it might fool someone for half a second, but snow shifts, wind blows, the branches freeze stiff and brittle, snapping when you try to adjust them. You pile them higher, thinking more is better, but then they sag, collapse, and dump snow back into your hole. And even if you make it perfect, even if you weave the branches tight and smooth, the Germans aren't looking with binoculars. They're looking with artillery. A shell doesn't care if your foxhole looks like a bush. It just lands, explodes, and buries your clever camouflage under 6 feet of dirt. Some men get creative. They weave pine boughs into mats, lash logs together with bits of rope or wire, build little huts against tree trunks. For a night or two, it almost works. The mats block some wind. The hut keeps out a bit of snow. But then the weather turns, and the weight of the storm crushes everything flat. You wake up buried under branches, choking on needles, swearing as you dig yourself out of the mess you built. The forest laughs at you every time. You try, it fails, and you go back to huddling in the open, wrapped in wool that never dries. The smell of pine becomes its own kind of torture. At first it's pleasant, sharp and clean, cutting through the stink of wet wool and sweat. But after weeks of lying on it, breathing it, picking needles out of your food, it turns sour. The needles rot, turn brown, crumble into dust that mixes with the mud. You can't escape it. You smell it when you eat, when you sleep, when you rub your eyes and pull out yet another needle lodged in your glove. You start to hate pine, hate the forest, hate the idea of trees altogether. You swear you'll never celebrate Christmas again, not if it means bringing one of those things indoors. Logs aren't just heavy, they're dangerous. Cutting them makes noise, noise carries, and noise brings fire. Men go out with axes, hacking at frozen wood, each thud echoing through the still air. You wince with every strike, knowing someone out there is listening. Sometimes the noise brings nothing. Sometimes it brings machine gun fire. Either way, the logs feel like they're not worth the risk. You curse the officer who ordered more cover, toss your useless axe aside, and crawl back into your hole empty-handed. Better to be exposed than dead with a log half cut beside you. And even when you get the wood, even when you stack it neatly, even when you weave branches so tightly you're proud of yourself, the forest betrays you. Snow piles on top, heavier than you expect, and the whole thing caves in. Rain soaks it, turning everything to sludge. Wind tears at it, ripping branches free, scattering them across the clearing. You rebuild again and again, each time more half-hearted, until eventually you stop bothering. You just let the snow fall, curl deeper into your coat, and tell yourself camouflage is overrated. The irony is that sometimes the camouflage works too well. You pile logs and branches over your hole, climb inside, and suddenly you're trapped. The roof collapses a little, pinning the entrance shut, and you scramble in the dark, shoving at frozen wood, coughing as dirt falls into your mouth. Panic sets in fast. You claw your way out, gasping for air, eyes wide as if you've just escaped drowning. You look back at your handiwork and realise you nearly built yourself a coffin. The next time someone suggests more branches, you tell them to dig their own grave instead. You use pine boughs for everything because there's nothing else. You line your boots with them, stuff them under your coat, wrap them around your helmet. They poke, scratch, stab you with every movement. The needles break off, wedge into your socks, prick at your skin until you bleed. But you keep using them because the alternative is nothing. Misery with pine feels slightly less empty than misery without. Logs become furniture of a sort. You drag one beside your hole, sit on it like a bench, balance your canteen cup on it while you wait for snow to melt. It wobbles, rolls, dumps everything into the mud. You curse, drag it back, sit again, repeat the cycle. The logs never stay where you want them. They're too heavy to move easily, too stubborn to cut, too clumsy to actually use. And yet you keep hauling them around, because at least it feels like you're doing something, anything, instead of just freezing in place. Some men joke that when the war is over, they'll never touch another tree again. No cabins, no Christmas, no campfires. They'll live in apartments made of concrete, where the only wood is the handle of a spoon. Others mutter curses at every branch that snaps, every log that slips, every pine needle that stabs. You join them, cursing the forest out loud, swearing at trees like they're enemy soldiers. It doesn't help, but at least it gives you something to do while your fingers stiffen and your socks soak through again. And still, despite all the failures, despite the collapsed roofs, the rotten needles, the noise of chopping, the danger of fire, you keep reaching for pine boughs and logs. Because out here, survival isn't about comfort. It's about trying again and again, even when you know it won't work. You weave the branches, stack the logs, build the camouflage, and watch it all fall apart. Tomorrow you'll do it again, because tomorrow you'll still be here, still in the Ardennes, still desperate enough to believe that maybe this time the forest will give you something back. Sleep is supposed to be when your body repairs itself. Out here, sleep is when the war reminds you that it doesn't care about repairs. You lie down in your hole, stiff with cold, eyes drooping after hours of digging and marching, and just when you think you might drift off, the first shell whistles through the air. It starts high, a thin note that rises above the forest, and then it crashes down with a force that rattles your teeth. Dirt rains from the walls of your foxhole, snow falls from the trees, and your heart slams against your ribs so hard you wonder if the whole forest can hear it. You're wide awake again, trembling, clutching your rifle as if it could stop the sky from exploding. The strange thing is, you do eventually fall asleep. Not because it gets quiet, but because exhaustion wins. Your body reaches a point where it doesn't care anymore. The artillery booms, the ground shakes, and somehow your brain decides that it's just another background noise, like traffic, or waves crashing on a shore. Except traffic doesn't shred men into pieces, and waves don't drop trees across foxholes. Still, your body adapts. You start drifting off to the rhythm of shells, snoozing through what would have been your worst nightmare a month earlier. But even when you sleep, it isn't real sleep. It's shallow, restless, broken by every thud, every whistle, every scream of shrapnel slicing through branches. You dream of nothing pleasant. You dream of home maybe, but the dream is warped. The sounds follow you. The artillery sneaks into your dreams, disguises itself as fireworks, as thunder, as train wheels grinding on tracks. You wake sweating, gasping, unsure if you're still in the hole or back in your own bed. Then you hear another shell, and you remember. The hole is your bed now, and the war doesn't stop for your dreams. Your buddy beside you is no help. He snores when he can, jerks awake when the blasts are close, mutters curses in his sleep. Sometimes he grabs your arm by accident, clinging in fear before rolling away again. You want to shove him, wake him, tell him to shut up. But you don't, because you know you'll know better. You've twitched in your sleep, shouted things, whimpered like a child when the ground shook under you. The artillery makes children out of everyone, stripping away the tough exteriors, leaving only raw nerves exposed in the dark. The sound is impossible to explain unless you've heard it. A shell doesn't just make noise, it owns the air. It whistles, it shrieks, it rips through the sky like a giant tearing fabric. Then it explodes, and the world convulses. Your chest vibrates, your ears ring, Your whole body tenses like you've been punched. The noise isn't just outside, it's inside you, rattling bones, tightening muscles, echoing in the back of your skull. No amount of fatigue ever makes you immune to it. You just learn to live in the space between blasts. Some men stuff cloth in their ears, hoping to soften the sound. Others bury their heads in coats, helmets pulled low, trying to block it out. It doesn't work. The noise goes through everything. The earth itself carries it, the vibrations crawling into your bones. You can bury yourself under 3 feet of dirt, and it will still rattle your ribcage. There is no silence in the Ardennes. There is only loud and louder. The ground adds its own misery. Every blast shakes it, jolting you awake if you were lucky enough to doze. Clods of dirt fall onto your face. Snow drifts collapse into your hole. Branches snap and land inches from your head. You brush it off, shift, try to settle again, only for another shell to start the cycle. You don't even bother cursing after a while. You just close your eyes, sigh, and wait for exhaustion to drag you back under. Sometimes the artillery lands close, too close, and you're certain it's the end. The blast deafens you, fills your hole with smoke, knocks the wind out of your chest. You clutch the dirt walls, praying they hold, praying you don't cave in. When it passes, you cough, spit, blink through the haze, check your body for holes you might not feel yet. If you're whole, you laugh weakly, shake your head, and mutter something bitter like, "Guess it wasn't my turn." Then you lie back down and try to sleep again, because what else is there to do? The forest changes under the bombardment. Trees topple, splintering like matchsticks. Branches rain down, snow avalanches off the canopy. The air smells constantly of smoke and sap, mingled with the acrid bite of gunpowder. You breathe it in all night, coughing, eyes watering, throat raw. Even if the artillery stopped, even if silence returned, the smell would keep you awake. The forest reeks of destruction, and your nose reminds you of it with every breath. Your body starts to betray you after a while. Sleep deprivation sets in. Your eyes ache, your mind fogs, your hands tremble even when it's quiet. You forget simple things. Where you put your rifle, what day it is, whether you already stood your watch or not. You hallucinate sometimes. Shapes move in the tree line, voices whisper at the edge of your hearing. You blink hard, shake your head, curse yourself, but the visions keep coming. The artillery doesn't just break the night, it breaks your brain. And then, in the middle of it, you find strange moments of calm. You're so tired, so numb, so used to the blasts that your body just gives up fighting. You lie back, let the shells fall, let the noise crash over you like waves, and somehow you sleep. Deep, dreamless, dead to the world. Your body shakes you awake hours later, amazed you didn't even stir when a tree collapsed 10 feet away. You shrug, rub your eyes, mutter something about being used to it. But inside, you know it isn't normal. You shouldn't be able to sleep through explosions. The war has rewired you, turned artillery into lullabies, taught your body to rest in chaos. It's survival, but it doesn't feel like victory. Morning doesn't bring relief. You wake groggy, body aching, eyes bloodshot. The artillery hasn't stopped. It never stops. You climb out of your hole, stretch stiff limbs, and look around at the forest shattered overnight. Craters pock the ground, trees lie splintered. Smoke drifts low across the snow. You yawn, scratch at lice, and think about how you'll have to do it all again tonight. Another battle with sleep. Another night of trying to ignore the sky falling around you. You start to measure time in blasts. Not in hours, not in minutes. Just the space between shells. Long pauses mean hope. Short pauses mean dread. You close your eyes in the long pauses, drift into half sleep, only to be jolted awake by the short ones. Your whole rhythm of life bends around artillery, bending your brain until the idea of a quiet night feels alien. You wonder if silence would even let you sleep anymore, or if you'd just lie awake waiting for the next crash. The truth is, you never really sleep. Not fully, not safely, not in a way that leaves you rested. You just collapse, drift, twitch awake, collapse again, repeating the cycle until dawn. Your body adjusts to survive, but it doesn't thrive. It wastes away day by day under the weight of exhaustion and noise. And the war goes on, shells falling, men dying, foxholes shaking. You close your eyes, pull your helmet low, curl deeper into your damp coat, and pray that tonight you'll get more than a handful of minutes strung together. You probably won't, but you pray anyway, because in the Ardennes, prayer feels like the only silence left. The boots are supposed to last you through everything. That's what they told you when they handed them out. Sturdy leather service boots, laced high, built for marching across Europe. Maybe they looked good the day you got them. Maybe they even felt solid for the first few weeks before the snow came, before the mud swallowed you whole. But in the Ardennes winter of 1944, boots become another curse. They don't protect you, not really. They soak up water like sponges, stiffen in the cold until they feel like wooden casts, and rub your feet raw until you're limping. They're less footwear and more torture devices that never come off. From the moment you wake, the misery begins. You jam your feet into boots that froze solid overnight, leather stiff as stone, laces frozen together in knots you have to chew at just to loosen. You shove, twist, force your toes inside, hissing as the icy interior presses against your skin. The shock makes you curse out loud, and your buddy just nods because he's doing the same thing. No one puts on boots quietly in the Ardennes. It's always a small battle, every single morning. Once they're on, the wetness greets you immediately. It doesn't matter if it snowed or rained, if you marched yesterday or stayed huddled in the foxhole. The boots are always wet. The socks are always damp. Your feet squelch with every step. Moisture sloshing inside like you're walking on swamp moss. You think maybe they'll warm up once you move. Maybe your body heat will dry them out. It never happens. The boots just trap the damp against your skin, baking it into the flesh until it feels permanent. The smell builds slowly, then all at once. Leather gone sour, wool rotting from the inside out, the tang of sweat mixed with mildew. You catch whiffs of it every time you shift, every time you pull your foot free to rub some circulation back in. Your buddy smells it too. You smell his. You both pretend not to notice, because calling it out won't change anything. The stink is as much a part of the forest as the snow and the gunpowder. Marching in wet boots is its own kind of punishment. The cold stiffens the leather until it cuts into your ankles, rubs raw patches into your heels, blisters that pop and ooze inside socks that are already breeding grounds for infection. Every step is pain layered on pain. You shift your weight, limp, try to walk on the edges of your feet, but nothing helps. The boots own you, and they don't let you forget it. At night, you peel them off with effort, tugging until your socks come off with them, clinging like wet rags glued to your skin. The sight is always the same. Feet swollen, white and wrinkled, toes raw, nails cracked, skin peeling like wet paper. You rub them furiously, blow hot air on them, pray that circulation comes back. Sometimes it does, and the pain is so sharp you bite down on your fist to keep from screaming. Sometimes it doesn't, and you lie awake in the dark, flexing useless toes, wondering if tomorrow they'll still be there. The socks are worse, wool that never dries, thick when new, but thin to rags by constant wear. Stretched loose at the ankles so they bunch up and rub you raw. You hang them in the foxhole, hoping they'll dry overnight. They don't. They freeze stiff, little woolen boards you have to crack back into shape in the morning. You rub them between your hands, blow on them, slap them against your legs until they bend again. Then you slide them on, wet from the start, and wonder why you bothered trying. Some men get desperate. They rotate socks, wearing one pair while tucking the other under their shirt, trying to use body heat to dry them. It never works. The socks just end up damp everywhere, sweat-soaked on your chest and swampy on your feet. Others stuff paper or rags into their boots, hoping to soak up the wet. The rags get soggy, the paper disintegrates, and now your feet are coated in pulp. A few soldiers burn their socks over tiny fires, holding them close until the wool singes. They stink, shrink, and sometimes catch fire, but the men still put them back on, convinced a little warmth is worth the damage. You hear horror stories about trench foot, and you see plenty of proof. Men with toes turning black, nails falling off, skin splitting open. You see a buddy pull his sock off and half his skin come with it, sloughing away like boiled meat. The medic shakes his head, mutters something about keeping them dry, and you want to laugh in his face. Dry? In the Ardennes? It's like telling a drowning man to breathe less water. Dry is impossible. Dry is a myth. The boots themselves start falling apart after a while. The stitching loosens, the soles crack, the leather warps from constant freezing and thawing. You patch them with rags, stuff them with straw, tie them together with bits of wire. Nothing holds. They're just decaying prisons strapped to your feet, dragging you down with every step. You dream of new boots, of anything soft and dry, but all you get is the same pair, day after day, until you can't tell where the boots end, and your misery begins. The socks rot faster than the boots. Holes open at the toes, at the heels, at the ankles. You stitch them, patch them, swap them with whatever spare pair you can scrounge. But every pair ends the same way. Damp, stinking rags wrapped around flesh that no longer feels human. You wonder sometimes if your feet are even worth saving, or if it would be easier to let the frost take them, leave stumps that hurt less than this constant swamp of misery. And still, you put them on every day. Wet boots, worse socks, the endless cycle. You lace them tight, curse the knots, feel the squelch as you step into the snow. You march until your feet are numb, collapse into your hole, peel them off with disgust, then force them back on in the morning. There's no break, no relief, no dry moment, just wet leather, rotten wool, and feet that carry you deeper into a forest that seems designed to destroy them. You tell yourself it could be worse. You could be barefoot. You could be wearing nothing at all. But the thought doesn't help much when the snow seeps in, when the blisters burst, when the socks stink so badly you gag every time you pull them off. You dream of dry shoes, the way you dream of warm meals, soft beds, silence without artillery. It's a fantasy, and like all fantasies out here, it fades the second you wake up to another day of wet boots and worse socks. Mail call in the Ardennes is less of a routine and more of a miracle. Nobody expects it. Nobody counts on it. But every once in a while, some half-frozen courier stumbles through the forest with a sack slung over his back, and suddenly men are sitting up straighter, calling out, pressing forward like kids on Christmas morning. For a few minutes, the forest feels almost human again. You stand there with your breath fogging in the cold, waiting to hear your name, praying it comes, trying not to look like you care too much in case it doesn't. When the letter actually lands in your hand, you stare at it for a moment before opening. It feels out of place here. A scrap of paper that doesn't belong in the mud and snow. The envelope is already damp, edges smudged, handwriting blurred by the journey. You hold it carefully, almost reverently, like it might shatter. And then you rip it open with shaking hands, gloves pulled off, bare fingers stinging in the cold as you dig inside for the folded piece of paper that smells faintly of home. The words don't matter at first. It's just the act of reading, of seeing familiar handwriting, of knowing someone thought of you long enough to put pen to paper. You squint at the letters in the dim light, mouthing the words silently, reading slower than you normally would, stretching it out so it lasts. Men around you do the same, hunched over scraps of paper, eyes fixed, lips moving. For those few minutes, nobody talks. The forest goes quiet except for the whistle of wind and the distant rumble of artillery. The content of the letters is almost always the same. Safe, ordinary details of life back home. Your mother talks about the weather, about neighbours, about food she wishes she could send. Your father says little, maybe just a line about work or the farm. A brother or sister adds a joke, a story, something meant to make you smile. If you're lucky, there's a letter from a girlfriend or a wife, full of words about missing you, about waiting, about love that feels both comforting and impossibly far away. The letters never mention the war, not really. They don't ask what you're going through. They pretend, in their own way, that you're still just down the street, that everything is normal. You clutch those words like they're lifelines, but they cut both ways. Reading about roast dinners, about warm kitchens, about fires crackling in hearths, makes your stomach ache with hunger and your body ache with longing. You picture it all too vividly. The smell of bread baking, the sound of a radio playing, the softness of a chair you haven't sat in for months. The letter drags you out of the hole for a moment, but when you look up, all you see is snow, mud, and men wrapped in wool that never dries. The contrast is unbearable. Some men read their letters out loud, laughing at the jokes, sharing bits about food or family. Others keep them close, tucked into coats, reading them again and again until the paper is soft, the ink smudged, the words nearly unreadable. A few fold them carefully, slip them into pockets over their hearts, carrying them like armour. You see men whispering to the pages at night, lips moving silently, as if talking to the paper is the same as talking to the person who wrote it. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the only thing keeping them sane. And then there are the men who don't get mail. They stand nearby, pretending they don't care, muttering curses about the postal service, making jokes about lost letters. But you see it in their eyes, the hunger, the ache, the way they look at your paper with longing so sharp it hurts. You offer to let them read yours sometimes, but they shake their heads. It's not the same. Reading about your mother or your sweetheart doesn't fill the hole left by theirs. So they sit in silence, staring at the snow, smoking cigarettes down to the filter, pretending the disappointment doesn't gnaw at them. The snow always makes it harder. You're trying to read with flakes landing on the paper, smudging ink, soaking the fragile sheet until it tears in your hands. You hunch over it, shielding it with your body, blowing snow away with hot breath that fogs the words. Your fingers go numb holding it, but you don't dare put it down. The paper feels more valuable than food, more necessary than warmth. You'll sit in the storm, shivering, lips trembling, eyes watering, just to get through another sentence about home. Sometimes the letters arrive too late. You see men open envelopes addressed weeks, months earlier, news already stale by the time it reaches the forest. A baby born you didn't know about. A holiday celebrated without you. A relative gone before you even got the chance to send your reply. The words cut deeper because they're old, because they remind you of time slipping away while you're stuck in the snow. You fold the letter anyway, tuck it into your coat, and tell yourself that being late is better than never. But it doesn't feel that way. Writing back is another misery. You crouch in your hole with pencil and paper, fingers stiff, trying to scratch words onto a page while snow dampens everything. The pencil lead breaks, the paper tears, your hands shake so badly the words crawl across the page like a drunk man staggering home. You don't know what to say. You can't describe the cold, the hunger, the fear. Even if you could, you wouldn't. You don't want them to know, not really. So you write about the weather, about your health, about how you're fine, always fine. You lie with every line, hoping they believe it, hoping they never guess what the truth looks like. Some men don't bother writing at all. They say it hurts too much. The act of putting words on paper, the knowledge that the reply won't come for weeks if it comes at all. Others write obsessively, every chance they get, filling pages with rambling words just to feel connected to someone, anyone outside the forest. They write about things that don't matter, food, sports, chores, because the things that do matter can't be put into words. Not here, not now. And then there are the letters nobody wants, the ones that come with official stamps, typed word instead of handwritten ones, death notices, condolences, a folded sheet of paper that says someone you loved is gone, or that someone's been informed you're gone. You see men crumple them, burn them, shove them into packs without reading. You see others read them again and again, faces blank, eyes hollow, until the paper disintegrates in their hands. Those letters linger longer than any others, heavier than rations, heavier than the rifles slung across their backs. In the end, the letters are both salvation and torment. They connect you to life beyond the snow, remind you that warmth and love and normalcy still exist. But they also remind you of everything you don't have, everything you can't touch, everything you might never see again. You fold them carefully, tuck them into your pocket, press them against your chest at night, and whisper silent prayers to paper that already feels too fragile to last. The snow falls harder, flakes soaking into the paper, even as you fold it. You slip it into your coat, close your eyes, and for a few minutes the forest fades. You hear the voices of the people who wrote to you, smell the dinners they described, feel the warmth they promised was waiting. And then another shell lands, the ground shakes, and you're back. Letters from home don't stop the war. They just remind you what's on the other side of it, if you can make it that far. You don't need a radio out here, because the forest already plays its own soundtrack. It never stops. From the moment you wake, shivering under a crust of snow in your foxhole, to the moment you force yourself back into uneasy half-sleep, the Ardennes surrounds you with noises you'll never forget. Not music, not bird song, not anything gentle or familiar. Just the kind of sounds that scrape into your bones, the kind that make you flinch even in your dreams, the kind that follow you home years later when you lie awake in a warm bed and wonder why you still hear them. The first instrument in the orchestra is the wind. The forest is full of it, threading between trees, howling across open fields, rattling branches heavy with ice. It's not a steady wind either. It shifts constantly, snapping at your face one minute, curling into your collar the next, chilling the sweat that never dries. At night, it whistles through cracks in the trees, moaning like a ghost, tugging at the scraps of camouflage you piled over your hole. Sometimes it roars, knocking snow loose from branches, so it falls in sudden avalanches that leave you sputtering, buried to your chest. Other times it goes still, so quiet you can hear your own teeth chattering. And somehow the stillness feels worse, because you know the silence won't last. The wind is cruel in its timing. Just when you've finally coaxed a tiny flame to life, holding your helmet full of snow over it, the gusts rush in and snuff it out. Just when you've tucked yourself into a blanket and told yourself maybe, just maybe, you can stay warm, the icy fingers of air sneak in through the seams and remind you who's in charge. It tears at your ears, cracks your lips, dries your eyes until they sting. You curse it, shield yourself from it, beg for it to stop. It never does. The wind is the constant reminder that the forest belongs to the elements, not to you. Then there are the whistles. Not birds, not the kind of whistles you'd hear on a quiet morning back home. These are the thin, rising cries of artillery shells as they cut through the air. You never forget the sound once you've heard it. It starts high, almost delicate, like the whine of a kettle on a stove. Then it drops lower, louder, faster, until your gut twists and you know it's coming down. You freeze in those seconds, holding your breath, counting without realizing you're counting. 1, 2, 3, impact. The ground bucks under you. The air punches your chest. Dirt rains into your eyes. Then another whistle begins, and the whole cycle repeats. Sometimes the whistles are far away, faint enough that you trick yourself into thinking you're safe. Other times they're close, too close, and you feel the pressure before the explosion even hits. The sound bends the air around you, squeezes your eardrums, shakes loose snow from the branches above. You press yourself flat against the wall of your hole, praying the shell isn't meant for you, knowing full well it doesn't matter what you pray. The whistle doesn't negotiate. It lands where it lands, and you're either still breathing after, or you're not. The shells themselves have their own vocabulary. Some roar, long and deep, echoing through the forest like a freight train. Others snap, sharp and quick, gone almost before you can register them. The air doesn't just carry the noise, it amplifies it, bouncing it off the frozen ground, off the trees, until you can't tell where it's coming from. You huddle in the mud, ears ringing, brain trying to sort the chaos, and eventually you give up. It doesn't matter where they're coming from. It only matters where they land. Between the wind and the shells, you'd think there'd be no room for anything else. But the forest adds its own background noises. Branches creak, sometimes groaning so loudly you're sure they'll snap. Trees topple in the distance, collapsing under the weight of ice or the force of blasts. Snow slides down hillsides in muffled rushes. Rats scurry through the undergrowth, scratching at roots, squeaking when they fight. Boots crunch on snow. Men mutter curses. Rifles clatter as they're set down or picked up. It's all part of the same endless soundtrack. Layers of sound stacking on top of each other until you can't find silence anywhere. Silence itself becomes suspicious. When the wind dies, when the shells pause, when the forest goes still, you don't relax. You tense. You wait. Because silence means something's coming. An ambush, a barrage, another long night of noise crashing down. The quiet never lasts long, but it's worse than the sound itself. You'd rather listen to shells than sit in that eerie stillness, heart pounding, wondering what's on its way. Sleep never escapes the soundtrack. You lie down in your hole, curl up in damp wool, and close your eyes. But the noise follows you. The wind rattles branches overhead, snow dripping onto your face in irregular taps. The shells fall at intervals, jolting you awake just when you've started to drift. You dream of noise too, of whistles rising, of blasts shaking the ground, of wind howling through your own bedroom back home. You wake up sweating, heart racing, not sure which world you're in. Then another shell lands, and you remember. You're still here. Some men try to fight the noise. They stuff cloth in their ears, hum to themselves, sing songs under their breath. A few bang helmets with spoons, trying to drown out the whistle of incoming shells with their own racket. It doesn't work. Nothing drowns it out. The sound is bigger than you, bigger than anything you can make. Eventually, you stop trying. You let it wash over you, seep into your bones, settle into the back of your skull where it will live forever. The soundtrack of the Ardennes isn't just noise, it's survival. The wind tells you when the storm is shifting, when snow is about to bury your hole, when the fire you're coaxing doesn't stand a chance. The whistles warn you, however briefly, of death on the way. The shells remind you that you're still alive, at least for now. You learn to interpret it all, to live by it, to move in rhythm with it. The war speaks in wind, whistles, and shells, and you don't get to cover your ears. You just listen day after day, until listening is the only thing you know how to do. You don't think much about medicine until you need it. Out here, needing it feels like the worst kind of luxury, because medical care in the Ardennes is just another extension of the misery. It's not antiseptic white tents and clean beds, not nurses smiling with kind voices, not tidy hospitals from recruitment posters. It's snow, mud, blood, and a medic with frozen hands digging through a bag that never has enough of anything. The army says you've got support. The reality is that your support is another exhausted man crouched in the cold, trying to patch you up with whatever scraps he has left. The medics themselves look just as bad as the rest of you. Helmets marked with red crosses, coats stiff with ice, faces grey with fatigue. You'd think the cross would protect them, that the enemy would spare them. But shells don't care about paint. Bullets don't care about symbols. Medics dive into the mud, like everyone else when the artillery starts, then climb back out to drag bodies that aren't moving. They're respected, sure. Some men call them angels. But the truth is, they're angels working with nothing. The first problem is cold. You can't stitch wounds when your fingers are stiff. You can't tie bandages when gloves are soaked and hands are numb. The medics strip gloves off anyway, teeth chattering, fumbling with a bloody cloth, trying to feel for torn flesh. Their hands crack and bleed, shaking so hard it looks like they're trembling with fear. Maybe they are, but they keep working, because what else can they do? The soldier bleeding in the snow doesn't care if the medic's hands are shaking. He just wants the bleeding to stop. And stopping it is never simple. Bandages freeze solid the moment they're exposed. Sulphur powder clumps in the damp air, refusing to stick to wounds. Morphine syrettes get brittle, snapping in half when you try to use them. Everything is colder, harder, slower. You press a dressing against a wound, and it freezes to the skin, stuck there like ice glued to flesh. You tear it free, tearing the wound open again. You press another on, hoping it holds. There's no perfect fix, just desperate improvisation. The wounded pile up fast. Every barrage, every skirmish leaves another man clutching his side, his leg, his arm. The medics rush from one to the next, sliding through snow, slipping on ice, crouching in holes to work. They check pulses with fingers that can't feel, listen for breathing through the roar of artillery. They work fast, not because they're careless, but because time is death's ally. A man can bleed out in minutes. Out here, minutes are all you ever have. Evacuation is another nightmare. There are no neat ambulances rolling down paved roads. There are sleds, makeshift litters, men hauling each other through snowdrifts with ropes tied to branches. The wounded scream, not just from pain, but from cold, because lying still in the snow feels like lying in a freezer. Some go quiet too soon, breath fogging weaker and weaker until it stops altogether. The ones who make it out are lucky, but they don't look lucky when they're bouncing on sleds, blood freezing into their coats, eyes wide with shock. Field hospitals are no better. You picture tents, stoves, doctors with clean instruments. What you get is overcrowded huts, half-collapsed barns, basements reeking of mould and smoke. Lanterns hang low, casting sickly yellow light over rows of stretchers. Men groan, cry out, mutter delirious prayers. The doctors work non-stop, scalpels dull, saws rusty, hands raw from scrubbing in icy water. They cut, they stitch, they amputate, and then they move on to the next. There's no time for tenderness, no time for reassurance. Just work, fast and brutal. Amputation is everywhere. Frostbite that spread too far. Trench foot that rotted flesh to the bone. Shrapnel that shredded limbs beyond repair. You hear the saws at night, the steady rasping as doctors cut through bone, the muffled screams of men biting down on rags. You smell it too, the sickly sweet stench of burning flesh when wounds are cauterized, the metallic tang of blood pooling on floors that never get cleaned. You don't forget those smells. They cling to you, follow you out of the hut, mingle with the gunpowder and wet wool already stuck in your nose. Supplies never stretch far enough. Bandages get reused, washed in freezing streams that do nothing to cleanse them. Morphine runs out, leaving medics with nothing but words to ease men in agony. Needles go blunt, sulphur powder dwindles, plasma freezes before it can be used. You see medics warming bottles under their coats, cradling them like infants, trying to keep the liquid from turning solid before they stick it into a vein. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The men still die, lips blue, eyes staring blankly at the rafters above. Infection becomes the enemy no one can shoot. Every cut festers, every wound oozes. Dirt and snow grind into injuries before the medic even reaches them. You wrap them, you pray, but the rot spreads anyway. Fever follows, delirium sets in, and the men mutter nonsense until they're silent. The medic shrugs helplessly, marks them as gone, and moves on. You realise then that survival isn't just about avoiding bullets. It's about avoiding scratches, blisters, splinters, any tiny injury that might open the door for infection to walk in. And through it all, the medics keep going. They don't get breaks. They don't get warm. They don't get silence. They just work, bending over one mangled body after another, faces lined with exhaustion. Some curse constantly, muttering under their breath as they fumble with gauze. Others hum quietly, as if the sound might steady their hands. A few go silent altogether, eyes flat, movements mechanical, like machines that only stop when they collapse from exhaustion. The soldiers respect them, but respect doesn't soften the reality. You see the medics falter. You see them cry, alone in the trees, wiping their faces with bloody hands. You see them stare blankly at men they couldn't save, guilt etched into every line of their faces. You want to tell them it's not their fault, that no one could do better in this icebox, but the words don't come. Out here, words feel useless. Only actions matter. And even those don't always change the outcome. So you keep patching yourselves up as best you can, wrapping rags around wounds, stuffing socks with straw, chewing aspirin tablets if you're lucky enough to have them. You joke about whiskey as medicine, but there's never enough to go around. You spit into snow, rub your hands raw, pray you don't get sick. Because if you do, if something festers or freezes or breaks, you know what waits. Not a clean bed, not a gentle nurse, not a neat hospital. Just a medic with frozen fingers and a bag that's already empty. The Ardennes doesn't care if you're hurt. It doesn't care if you're bleeding, coughing, limping, or screaming. The forest is just an icebox, indifferent to pain, indifferent to survival. Medical care is only another layer of endurance. You survive if you're lucky, you die if you're not, and either way, the war goes on. Snow changes everything. It covers the ground, buries the trees, erases all the lines you used to rely on. It makes the Ardennes look deceptively quiet, like some untouched postcard scene. But it also makes you stick out like a stain on a white tablecloth. Olive drab uniforms that blended fine in mud and leaves now scream against the snow, turning you into walking targets. Every step you take feels exposed. Every move another invitation to be seen. So the army hands out a solution, and you realise quickly that it's not really a solution at all. White sheets, scraps of cloth, anything they can find to throw over your shoulders and call camouflage. You drape one over your coat, and it barely covers half of you. The edges flap in the wind, catching on branches, dragging in the snow. You tie it with rope or string, and the knots dig into your body, rubbing against your neck until the skin cracks. You adjust it constantly, trying to make it sit right, but it never does. It slides off your shoulders, tangles in your rifle, catches your boots when you crouch. Instead of blending in, you feel like a ghost wearing laundry. The fabric itself isn't made for war. Thin, cheap, sometimes just dyed bedsheets repurposed for the front. They soak up snow instantly, sagging heavier with each step. By the end of the day, your camouflage is less white than grey, stained with mud, streaked with soot, spattered with blood. It clings to you in the worst ways, wrapping around your legs so you stumble, tangling in your gear so you can't move quickly when you need to. The cloth whispers against itself as you shift, a constant reminder that you're carrying dead weight. Even when it looks decent, it fools no one. The Germans know what to look for. A patch of snow that moves wrong, that breathes, that smokes when you exhale. A sheet doesn't change that. It just makes you feel a little better. Like a child hiding under a blanket and pretending the monsters can't see him. You crouch in a drift, sheet draped over you, heart pounding as you hear footsteps nearby. You tell yourself you're invisible, but deep down, you know the sheet is just another thin layer of hope, flapping uselessly in the wind. The wind, of course, never lets you forget how useless it is. It catches the cloth, whips it around, tears it off entirely. You chase it across the snow, scrambling like an idiot after a flag you didn't even want, while your buddies laugh and curse. You tie it tighter next time, and the rope digs in deeper. The fabric rips, leaving you with scraps that flutter pitifully around your shoulders. You patch it with more cloth, more rope, until you're practically mummified. And still, the snow stains it, the mud chews at it, the wind tears at it again. You start to notice how ridiculous you all look. An entire line of men wrapped in sheets, hoods drooping, cloth flapping, rifles poking out awkwardly. You look less like soldiers and more like laundry day gone wrong. Some men laugh about it, joking that they're marching ghosts, that they'll scare the Germans to death instead of shooting them. The laughter fades quickly, though, when the first shots ring out and you remember that the sheets don't stop bullets. The camouflage doesn't even work at night. Snow glows under moonlight, reflecting every flicker of movement. You crouch low, sheet dragging behind you, and still you feel exposed, lit up by nature's own spotlight. At dawn, when the first rays hit the snow, the white turns blinding, and your sheet, dingy, stained, wrinkled, only makes you stand out more. You squint, eyes watering from the glare, stumbling blindly as the cloth tangles around your knees. Your rifle suffers too. You try to wrap it in cloth, thinking it will blend better, but the fabric slides down, catches in the bolt, clogs the trigger. You rip it off in frustration, only to realise the dark barrel now gleams against the snow, a beacon to anyone watching. You smear mud on it, hoping to dull the shine, but the mud freezes into chunks that make it even harder to use. Every attempt to fix the problem creates two new ones, and you stop bothering. You carry your sheet because you're told to, not because you believe in it. The worst part is the wet. The sheets soak up everything. Snow, sleet, rain, it all clings, seeping through until your coat is wetter than before. You feel the cold spread down your back, into your chest, across your arms. You wring the fabric out at night, twisting it until your hands ache, but by morning it's stiff with ice again. You drape it over yourself anyway, crunching as you move, a frozen shell cracking with every step. The sound alone could give you away, and you curse it under your breath as if the sheet could hear you. And yet, for all its uselessness, you cling to it. Because even if it doesn't work, even if it's a joke, even if it feels more like wishful thinking than camouflage, it's still something. Something between you and the snow. Something that lets you pretend you're harder to see, harder to hit, harder to kill. In a place where hope is always in short supply, even a scrap of white cloth feels like a shield. Thin, flimsy, laughable, but a shield all the same. You march in it, you fight in it, you sleep in it, and every morning you shake it out, tie it tighter, and tell yourself maybe today it'll do its job. Maybe today it'll fool someone. Maybe today it'll make the difference. Deep down, you know better. The sheet is just another layer of misery, another cruel joke played by the war. But you wear it anyway, because in the Ardennes, even wishful thinking is worth holding on to. You spend hours building it, maybe even days, digging into the frozen ground with a shovel that feels like it weighs more than you do, hauling logs that crack against your shoulder, weaving branches, piling snow into walls, anything to carve out a space that feels safer than lying flat in the open. You hunch over in the hole, stack another pine bough, pat the snow into place, and tell yourself it's coming together. It's not warm, not comfortable, not even close, but it's something. Something between you and the cold, between you and the shells, between you and the idea that maybe tonight you'll finally get a few hours of sleep without freezing solid. You finish it, crawl inside, curl up in your damp coat, and let yourself believe it's enough. Then it collapses. It never happens when you expect it. You brace for the artillery, for the shells that shake the ground and send dirt raining into your eyes. But the shelter doesn't always wait for that. Sometimes all it takes is snow, a branch too heavy, a drift too deep, the weight of frozen air pressing down on your flimsy construction until it gives. The roof caves, the walls buckle, and suddenly you're buried in the same snow you were trying to keep out. You choke, gasp, flail in the dark, clawing at branches and dirt, cursing every choice you made that led you here. The snow blinds you first. It pours in, fine powder choking your nose and mouth, hard chunks hitting your face and chest. You cough, spit, rub at your eyes, only for more to fall. It's cold, yes, but it's also heavy. You never think of snow as heavy until it's crushing your ribs, pinning your arms, making it impossible to move. You push up, and it pushes back. A frozen blanket that doesn't care if you suffocate. You kick, thrash, dig upward desperately, and eventually you break through, gulping air, gasping like a drowning man who just broke the surface. You lie there for a moment, shaking, chest heaving, covered in white, and then you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because the alternative is screaming. Sometimes it isn't snow. Sometimes it's logs, branches, pieces of your own handiwork. You spend half a day dragging them into place, lashing them together with rope and wire, and then the first real storm brings the whole mess down. The logs slam onto your shoulders, branches scrape your face, a beam cracks across your helmet so hard your ears ring. You shove the pieces aside, crawl out from under them, and sit there dazed, staring at the wreckage. All that work, all that effort, and you're right back where you started, sitting in the snow with nothing but wet wool and bad luck. If you're unlucky, it collapses at the worst possible time. In the middle of the night, when you're finally asleep. You wake to weight pressing on your chest, mouth full of snow, ears ringing from the sudden crash. You thrash awake, fighting both panic and exhaustion, clawing your way out while your buddy curses beside you. By the time you're both free, you're wide awake, shaking, colder than before. Your shelter reduced to a pile of broken branches and churned up snow. You don't go back to sleep after that. You just sit in the dark, staring at the ruins, waiting for dawn that never seems to come. Artillery makes it worse. Every shell rattles the ground, shakes the trees, sends snow and dirt sliding into your hole. You shore up the walls with logs, but the blasts crack them anyway. You pile more snow, but the vibrations loosen it until it slumps in on top of you. The shelter isn't protection, it's a trap. You realise that, crouched in the dark while the walls close in, that the thing you built to save yourself might be the thing that buries you. You scramble out, abandoning the hole, lying flat in the open while the shells fall. Because even the snow feels safer than being trapped. And it's not just the big collapses, it's the constant little ones. Snow drifting in, walls sagging, branches snapping overhead. Every hour you're clearing, scooping, rebuilding. You patch one side and another caves in. You fix the roof and the walls slump. It's endless maintenance, endless failure. You start to wonder why you bother. The hole isn't keeping you warm. It isn't keeping you dry. All it does is demand more work from you, more energy you don't have. But you keep fixing it anyway, because the alternative, lying down in the open waiting for snow to cover you, is worse. There's a special kind of misery in hearing it go. A crack, a groan, a sudden rush of snow sliding loose. You look up, and the roof is gone, sagging down on top of you, burying everything in white. You mutter a curse, shove at it, clear enough space to breathe, and then you sit there staring at the wreckage, too tired to rebuild. You know you'll fix it eventually, because you have to. But for a moment you just sit in the ruins, shoulders slumped, face numb, thinking about how stupid it is that you're fighting the forest more than the enemy. Sometimes it isn't even your shelter that collapses, it's your buddies. You hear the crash, the muffled shout, and you scramble over to dig him out. He emerges coughing, caked in snow, spitting curses between gasps for air. You laugh at him, he laughs at you, and then an hour later it's your turn. The forest collapses on everyone eventually. Nobody escapes it. The only difference is how long it takes. And when you rebuild worse. You don't have the energy for precision, for care. You slap logs together, pile branches at random, pack snow with numb hands until it holds. It looks flimsy, feels flimsy, and you know it won't last the night. But you crawl inside anyway, because flimsy is better than nothing. You curl up, close your eyes, and hope it holds just long enough for you to steal a little more sleep before the next collapse. You start to accept it as part of life. Shelters collapse, holes flood, roofs sag. You don't even curse anymore when it happens. You just dig yourself out, shake the snow off, and start again. The misery becomes routine, the failures predictable. You stop expecting the shelter to save you. You start seeing it for what it is. Another layer of survival, fragile, temporary, and doomed, and yet you keep building. Every day, every night, you pile more snow, more logs, more branches. Not because you believe it'll hold, but because you have to try. Because in a forest where everything collapses eventually, the act of building feels like defiance. You know it'll come down on you again. You know you'll wake with a mouth full of snow and lungs full of panic. But until then, you keep working. Because out here, the only thing worse than being buried alive is giving up before the snow even falls. Survival in the Ardennes isn't about winning. It isn't about glory or victory or heroism, no matter what the posters back home promised. Out here, survival is smaller, meaner, and uglier. It's about getting through one night without freezing. It's about getting a fire to burn for more than a few minutes before the wind kills it. It's about finding a biscuit that hasn't gone soft with mould, a sock that isn't stiff with ice, a cigarette that still lights even when your fingers barely work. It's about holding on just long enough to see another grey dawn bleed through the trees. Barely is the word that defines it. You don't thrive here. You don't live here. You just scrape by breath, shiver by shiver, day after day. Every part of survival feels like a compromise. You eat because you have to, not because the food is edible. You wear clothes that make you itch, stink and sag, because being miserable is better than being dead. You dig holes that collapse, sleep on branches that poke, drink water that tastes like ash, all because the alternative is worse. Survival isn't about comfort. It's about stacking small miseries into a pile high enough to climb out of death's reach for one more night. You build that pile every day, knowing it will crumble, knowing you'll have to start again tomorrow. You learn to measure time differently, not in hours, not in days. Time is meals, if you can call them that. Time is watches, stretches of cold darkness, where you listen for footsteps that may or may not come. Time is barrages, the rhythm of shells falling in patterns you start to recognize, even though they're random. Time is simply being alive at dawn, counting your breaths, telling yourself you've lasted one more round. Clocks don't matter. Calendars don't matter. The forest keeps its own cruel schedule, and you follow it because you have no choice. Survival takes your body first. The hunger gnaws constantly, even when you've just forced down rations. Your stomach cramps, growls, twists in protest at the constant diet of canned meat and frozen chocolate. You dream about food, vivid dreams of bread, of soup, of coffee that isn't lukewarm sludge. You wake up salivating, only to find the same tin waiting in your pack, the same cold lump that never fills you. The hunger never leaves. It just becomes part of you, gnawing in the background while you shovel snow or fire your rifle. The cold takes the rest. Your fingers swell, crack, bleed. Your toes go numb, then tingle, then turn white and useless. You rub them, blow on them, stick them under your arms, and still the cold eats deeper. Your lips split until they bleed. Your breath burns in your lungs. Your skin stings with wind that never relents. Every part of you aches, but the ache is preferable to the numbness. Ache means blood is still moving. Numb means frostbite. You pray for pain because pain means you're still here. Sleep doesn't save you either. You curl in the foxhole, wrapped in damp wool, and close your eyes. The shells wake you. The cold wakes you. The fear wakes you. When you do dream, the dreams are cruel. You dream of warmth, of home, of beds with soft sheets and pillows that don't smell like smoke. You reach for them, smile in your sleep, and then wake to find your face pressed against frozen dirt, your body curled in a damp hole, your pillow a steel helmet that reeks of grease and sweat. The dreams make the waking worse, and the waking makes the dreams crueler. Survival demands that you make choices you'd never make anywhere else. You drink water you know is dirty because thirst will kill you faster. You eat food that tastes spoiled because hunger doesn't give you the option to be picky. You wear socks that tear your feet apart because bare skin against frozen boots is worse. You use your helmet as a chamber pot because climbing out of the hole in the middle of a barrage is suicide. You laugh about it later because laughing feels better than crying, but the truth is that survival strips you of dignity. You stop thinking about what's normal, what's decent, what's right. You only think about what keeps you breathing. Your buddies become part of survival too. You lean on each other, literally and figuratively. You share cigarettes, coffee powder, scraps of food. You trade socks when yours are beyond saving. You huddle close in the foxhole, back to back, taking turns thawing each other with the little body heat you have left. You curse each other, complain about the snoring, about the smell, about the constant shifting that makes sleep impossible. But you know you wouldn't last without each other. Alone, the forest would swallow you whole. Together you buy yourselves a little more time. The forest doesn't make survival easy. Snow falls constantly, drifting into holes, collapsing shelters, burying food and supplies. Mud lurks under the snow, waiting to swallow boots, to soak socks, to turn every step into a slog. Trees creak ominously, branches snap without warning. Avalanches bury everything you've built. The Ardennes isn't neutral ground. It's an enemy in its own right, relentless and patient. It doesn't have to fire bullets or shells to kill you. It just waits, pressing cold against your body until something gives. The war itself is only part of it. Yes, the shells fall. The bullets fly. The enemy lurks in the trees. But most of the time, survival isn't about fighting the Germans. It's about fighting the forest, the weather, your own body. The enemy could vanish tomorrow, and you'd still be here, huddled in a hole, trying to keep your feet from rotting, your fingers from freezing, your stomach from gnawing itself to pieces. The war just adds another layer of misery on top of the one you already live with. Survival changes your perspective. Back home, survival meant paying rent, getting food on the table, making it through a workday. Out here, survival is smaller. It's lighting a cigarette without the wind blowing it out. It's getting a helmet of snow to melt before it freezes again. It's finding socks that are only damp instead of soaked. It's chewing through a frozen chocolate bar without breaking your teeth. Victories shrink until they're barely visible, but they matter. They're what you cling to when everything else feels impossible. You stop thinking long term. Tomorrow is too far away, let alone next week or next month. You think about the next hour, the next watch, the next time you get to close your eyes for 10 minutes. You measure life in increments so small they don't seem like life at all, just survival. Planning for the future feels absurd. The future is a rumour. The present is the only thing you can touch, and it's usually cold, wet, and miserable. And yet, somehow you keep going. Not because you're strong, not because you're brave, but because you don't know what else to do. You wake, you curse, you put on wet boots and worse socks, you choke down cold rations, you dig snow out of your hole, and you keep breathing. Each day you tell yourself you'll quit tomorrow, that you'll collapse, that you can't possibly endure another night. Then tomorrow comes, and you do it again. Survival is inertia. It's not heroism. It's just momentum carrying you forward through misery you never thought you could endure. Barely. That's the word that sticks. You don't conquer the Ardennes. You don't master it. You don't even beat it. You barely survive it, clinging to scraps of warmth, scraps of food, scraps of sanity. And when it finally ends, when the shells stop and the forest falls silent, you don't feel triumphant. You just feel empty. You look around at the snow, at the wreckage, at the bodies half buried in drifts. And you realise you made it. Not clean, not whole, not strong, just alive. Barely alive, but alive all the same. And in the end, that's all survival ever meant in the Ardennes. Not victory, not comfort, not anything you'd want to remember fondly. Just enduring the forest, the cold, the hunger, the noise, the filth. Just dragging yourself through one more night, one more day, one more hour. Just surviving. Barely. And so you find yourself at the end of it, though not in the way stories usually end. There's no neat conclusion, no victory parade waiting with flags and cheers. Just snow, still falling. Just boots, still wet. Just coats, still damp and stinking of wool that never dries. The forest hasn't changed. The trees still creak. The wind still moans. The shells still echo in the distance. You've changed, but in ways you don't want to think about yet. You've learned how little a body needs to keep moving, how much misery it can swallow before breaking, how survival isn't glorious or noble, or even something you want to remember. It's just a long list of nights you somehow didn't freeze in, mornings you somehow woke up breathing. The Ardennes doesn't give you closure. It doesn't pat you on the back and say, well done. It doesn't care if you endured, if you limped through frostbite, if you coughed through smoke, if you dug yourself out of collapsing shelters. It doesn't care about your letters, your dreams of coffee, your longing for warmth. The forest is indifferent. It was here before you, and it will be here after you. Silent witness to all the things that broke you. And maybe that's the only ending there is. Not triumph, not clarity, just the simple fact that you kept going. You lasted when everything tried to grind you down. You dragged yourself from one miserable day to the next, through hunger, through noise, through filth, through cold that never let go. Barely, but still. That's what survival was here. Not living, not thriving, not even fighting in any grand sense, just enduring. The snow keeps falling, the forest keeps groaning, the wind keeps whispering. But somewhere beyond it, there's a world that isn't frozen, a world that smells of bread and coffee, a world where boots dry by a stove, and beds don't collapse under you. You hold on to that thought, not because it makes the cold easier, but because it's the only thread left to grip when your body is too tired to fight. Maybe you'll see it again, maybe you won't, but for now, you breathe, and that's enough. And with that, the Ardennes fades, not in a blaze of glory, but in the same grey haze it began, just cold and quiet, and the faint sound of someone shifting in their foxhole nearby. You close your eyes, let the noise blow into the background, and drift, not into comfort, not into safety, but into a fragile kind of rest. The kind you take where you can get it. The kind you barely notice until it's gone.